Welcome back to Potter Red, where the impossible hides one door down from the ordinary. Today's story: Harry uncovered the wizard plot to rob Gringotts at age 6 and the goblins named him Bloodsworn. Before we go down into the dark, do take a moment to subscribe and ring the bell so no future tale ever slips past you. Comfortable? Good, let's begin. Chapter 1: The Counting Man. Harry Potter was 6 years old, and he knew how to count things that other people did not think worth counting. He counted the milk bottles left on the step at number 4 Privet Drive, 2 on weekdays, 3 on Saturdays, none on Sundays because the milkman took a day off like God was supposed to. He counted the seconds it took Uncle Vernon's face to go from pink to the color of tinned tomatoes, which told you exactly how long you had to get out of a room before something happened in it. He counted the biscuits in the tin in the cupboard under the stairs, which was his cupboard and which held no biscuits, so the count was always 0, but Harry liked to check because checking was a thing you could do when there was nothing else. Counting was safe. Nobody could take a number away from you once you had it in your head. Aunt Petunia could lock the cupboard and Dudley could sit on you and Uncle Vernon could roar until the window glass buzzed, and you would still have your numbers, tidy in yours, stacked up behind your eyes like the good clean plates on the top shelf that no one was allowed to touch. The Dursleys thought Harry was slow. He had heard Aunt Petunia say so to the woman at the corner shop, in the special quiet voice she used for talking about him, the voice that pretended to be sad. He doesn't say much, we think there's something not quite right. Harry did not say much because when he said much it went badly for him, and he had counted that too. The number of times talking had helped him against the number of times it had cost him a meal, and the numbers were not close, so he watched instead. He had got very good at watching. When you have spent a great deal of your life sitting in a cupboard, learning to read the world through the crack of a door, you learn to notice the sort of thing that grown people who walk about in the middle of rooms with all the lights on never notice at all. That was how he came to notice the Counting Man. It was the last week of June, and school had let out, and the days were the long, hot kind that went slack in the middle like a rope with nobody pulling it. Dudley had a new bicycle and a gang of boys who followed him about, and their game that summer was called Harry Hunting, and the rules of it were simple, so Harry spent his days finding places the game could not reach. He had a map of them in his head: the alley behind the row of shops on Magnolia Crescent where the bins made a wall, the scrubby end of the park where the swings had rusted and no one came. And best of all, the lock-up garages at the far end of Wisteria Walk, a low brick row of them behind the houses, with their up-and-over doors, most of them shut and forgotten, smelling of oil and warm dust and pigeons. Number 6 of the lock-up garages had a padlock that was always closed and a door that had not moved in Harry's memory. Number 9 had been open once and full of a dead car with no wheels. The rest were just doors. Harry liked them because grown people did not come here except to fetch a lawnmower or hide from their wives, and Dudley's gang thought the garages were boring. And a boring place is a safe place when you are 6 and small for your age, and there are 5 of them. He was sitting with his back against the sun-warmed brick between number 7 and number 8, doing nothing, which he was also very good at, when the Counting Man came. Harry heard him before he saw him, shoes on the concrete, a slow even tread, not hurrying, not idle. Grown people who lived on Wisteria Walk walked in a particular loose way, home from somewhere, thinking about tea. This was not that. This was the walk of a person who had come here on purpose and did not want anyone to know it. Harry knew that walk. It was how he walked himself when he was going somewhere he was not supposed to be. He went still. Being still was another thing he could do for a long time. He watched around the edge of the brick. The man stopped at number 6, the one with the padlock that was always shut, and stood in front of it with his hands folded in front of him, and did nothing, which was the first strange thing, because you do not walk all the way to the end of Wisteria Walk to stand in front of a garage door. He was tall and thin and wore a gray suit that was too heavy for the weather, buttoned all the way up, and a gray hat, and he did not seem hot, which was the second strange thing because everyone that June was hot. Even the pigeons looked hot. This man stood in his buttoned gray suit in the middle of the afternoon and looked as cool as the inside of the fridge. Then he took out his keys. Harry watched the keys as he watched everything he could not have, carefully, greedily, from the corner of his eye. There were a lot of them on a plain ring, and they were the ordinary sort, silver-colored, brass-colored, the sort every grown person carried. The man did not choose one. He held the whole ring up in front of the padlock, flat on his palm, showing the lock his keys, and he said something Harry could not hear, quiet, only his lips moving. And the padlock opened. It did not open the way a padlock opens. Harry had opened padlocks. He had a small talent for it, from wanting into places he was kept out of, and a padlock opens with a key, with a click and a swing of the shackle, and a hand to do it. This padlock opened with no key and no hand. The shackle simply lifted itself out of the body, smooth and slow, the way a snail puts its head out, and the whole lock came apart in the air and hung there for a moment, in 2 pieces, doing nothing, obeying nothing, breaking every rule Harry had ever counted about how the world was allowed to behave. Then the man's hand closed over it, and it was just a padlock in a hand again, and he lifted the up-and-over door, which rolled up without a sound, though every other door on the row shrieked, and he stepped into the dark of number 6, and the door came down behind him. Harry sat with his back to the brick and his knees pulled up and did not move for a while. He was not going to tell anyone, obviously. There was no one to tell. If he told Aunt Petunia, she would say he was making up stories, and making up stories was near the top of the list of Harry's crimes, above being ungrateful and below asking questions. If he told a teacher, school was over anyway. If he told Dudley, Dudley would tell the gang, and the gang would come, and there would be no more garages. So there was no one, and that was fine, because Harry was used to holding on to things by himself. He had a lot of practice, but he had seen it. That was his. Nobody could take it away. He thought about it very hard, the way you turn a thing over to look at all its sides. There were, he decided, two kinds of explanation. The first kind was that he had made a mistake, that the padlock had already been opened, that a wire had held it, that the sun had done something to his eyes. Harry considered this honestly because he did not want to be the sort of person who saw things that were not there. That was Mrs. Number 7, who talked to the wall. But he had watched the shackle lift itself. He had counted the pieces, too, hanging in the air with a hand's width of nothing beneath them. You do not mistake nothing for a wire, so the first kind of explanation was out. The second kind of explanation was that the world had a rule in it that Harry had not known about, and that this man knew it and used it, and if there was one such rule, there might be others. Harry sat with that, and it was not a frightening thought exactly. It was more like the feeling of finding a door in a wall you had walked past every day. His whole life had been walls. A door was interesting. He waited. He was good at waiting. He counted the pigeons on the garage roofs, 11, then 9, then 11 again as 2 came back, and he counted his own breaths to keep them slow. And after a long time, when the light had gone the color of weak orange squash, the door of number 6 rolled up again without a sound, and the gray man came out. He had a case now that he had not had before, a flat black case with a handle held down at his side, and he set the padlock back on the hasp and held his keys up to it and said his quiet nothing, and the shackle folded itself down into the body of the lock, and the man walked away up Wisteria Walk in his going somewhere on purpose walk and was gone. Harry counted to 200 after that before he moved. Then he got up and his legs had gone to pins from sitting, and he went and stood in front of number 6. The padlock was shut. He put his thumb on it. It was cold, colder than a metal thing sitting all afternoon in June had any right to be, cold like it had come out of the fridge with the man, and when Harry pressed on the shackle it did not move even a little, though a padlock that is only hooked shut and not locked will always give a little. He tried his thumbnail in the keyhole gently as he taught himself. The keyhole was there, but something behind it, some feeling he had no word for, made his thumb not want to go in, made the small hairs on his arms stand up the way they did when Uncle Vernon went quiet instead of loud. He took his hand back. There was a mark on the door of number 6 that he had not noticed before, low down near the bottom, scratched into the paint. It was not writing, not the writing he knew. It was a shape like a little crossed circle with a tail, drawn in one clean stroke. It might have been there for years. It might have been drawn that afternoon. Harry looked at it until he was sure he could shut his eyes and draw it, and then he shut his eyes and drew it in the dust of his own memory and put it away where his numbers lived. Then he went home, because it was late, and there would be trouble if he was later, and there was. He was given no supper, which he had expected, and locked in his cupboard, which he had expected, and he lay on his thin mattress in the dark with the strip of hall light under the door and the smell of the spiders, and instead of being hungry, he was hungry, but he was always hungry, and you could put it somewhere if you tried. He thought about the counting man. He had decided to call him that. It fit. The man moved like someone keeping account of his own. So many steps, so many seconds standing still, everything measured out, nothing wasted. Harry kept counts himself and knew that discipline when he saw it. It made him feel in a small strange way that he had recognized something. He thought about the case. It had been flat and it had gone in empty. A man does not carry a full case loosely, and going in he had carried it loose. It had swung light. It had come out heavy, held stiff and close. So the man had gone into an empty garage with an empty case and come out with a full one. That meant there was something in number 6 that could fill a case, and that the man came to take it away a bit at a time, or to bring it and leave it, but the going in light and coming out heavy said taking, not leaving. It was clean reasoning. Harry turned it over and could not find a hole in it. He thought about the mark on the door. And he thought because he was 6, and because thinking about frightening things in the dark is a thing 6-year-olds cannot help. He thought about the fact that a man who could open locks with no key and stand cool in the heat and make a door go quiet was a man you did not want to be caught watching. He did not know why he knew that. He knew it as he knew not to be in the kitchen when Uncle Vernon came home cross. Some people you watched from very far away, or not at all. He would watch from very far away. That was the last thing he decided before he slept, and in the morning it still seemed right, which was how Harry judged his decisions, whether they survived the night. Number 4 Privet Drive did not want Harry in it during the day, which suited Harry, because Harry did not want to be in it either. Aunt Petunia gave him jobs, weed this, wipe that, and if he did them quickly and did not break anything and did not, above all, ask any questions, he could get himself out the door by mid-morning and not be wanted again until the light went. Dudley's birthday was coming and the house was full of the fuss of it, so that summer the wanting Harrigan was even stronger than usual, and Harry made himself very small and very useful and very absent and slipped the leash. He did not go straight to the garages. He was not stupid. He went the long way round the whole of Little Winging first, past the church with its clock, past the shops, down to the play park and back up by the allotments, and only then, drifting, as though he had washed up there by accident, to Wisteria Walk. If anyone had been watching him, and he had begun that summer to think in that shape, if anyone is watching me, they would have seen a shabby boy with nothing to do, going nowhere in particular, the way boys with nothing to do went nowhere all over England. He did not go to the garages every day. He made himself skip days, though it was hard, because the garages were the most interesting thing that had ever happened to him, and skipping a day felt like putting the biscuit tin back without checking. But he had reasoned it out. If the counting man came on the same days, then coming every day himself was a waste and a risk. Better to learn the man's days and come only on those, and stay away on the others, so that if the man ever did look up and see a boy, it would not be the same boy always there, always in the same spot. So Harry watched from a different place each time. From the roof line of the low wall behind the allotment sheds, where he could see the whole row of garage doors small and far. From the mouth of the alley by the substation, where he had a slice of number 6 and could be gone in 3 steps. Once, greatly daring, from inside number 9, the open one with the dead car, crouched behind the rust with the pigeon smell in his nose and his heart going, watching through the gap where the door didn't meet the ground, and he built up his numbers. The counting man came on some afternoons and not others. Over the first 2 weeks Harry logged him 5 times, and there was a shape to it he could nearly see and not quite. Not every day, not the same day, but never 2 days running, and never on a Sunday. Harry sat with the days in his head, 5 of them, and tried to make them into a rule, and could not, and that bothered him more than anything else, because everything the man did was so exactly measured that Harry was certain the days were measured too, and he just could not see the ruler. The case went in light and came out heavy, every time. Harry stopped bothering to check that one. It was a settled fact now, filed with the milk bottles and the tomato-red face. And then on the 5th time there was a second man. He came from the other end of Wisteria Walk, from the alley, so that he and the counting man arrived at number 6 from opposite directions at nearly the same moment, which meant they had arranged it, which meant there was more than one of them, which changed everything. Harry, flat behind the allotment while 100 feet off, went very still and watched with his whole self. The second man was not like the first. Where the counting man was thin and gray and neat, this one was big, not fat like Uncle Vernon, but big the way a door is big, wide across, with hands that hung heavy at his sides and a way of standing that took up more room than a person needed. He wore workman's clothes, but they were wrong. The boots were too clean and the hands too still. Harry knew about hands. Uncle Vernon's hands were always doing something, drumming, gripping, jabbing. This big man's hands did nothing at all, hung there like tools put down, and that was somehow worse than if they had been doing something. The 2 men stood in front of number 6 and did not shake hands and did not smile. The counting man opened the padlock as he did, and Harry saw the shackle lift itself far off and small. Even from 100 feet, the wrongness of it touched the back of his neck. They went in together and the door came down. Harry did his arithmetic. 1 strange man was a mystery. 2 strange men arriving from 2 directions at an arranged time, going into a locked garage with a thing inside it that could fill a case. That was not a mystery anymore. That was a plan. Harry did not know what the plan was for. But he knew a plan when he saw one being carried out quietly by people who did not want to be seen, and he knew that the people who make such plans do not like to be watched, and he knew, as he knew the shape of trouble coming, that he had wandered up to the edge of something with a long drop on the other side. He should stop, he thought. A sensible boy would stop. He thought about being a sensible boy for about as long as it took the 2 men to be inside the garage, which was 40 minutes, Harry counting, and at the end of the 40 minutes he knew that he was not going to stop, and he examined this in himself as he examined everything, honestly turning it over. It was not that he was brave. He did not think of himself as brave. Brave was Dudley jumping off the shed. Brave was a word for other people. It was that the garages were his. He had found the strangeness first, before he knew there were 2 of them, and it had been the most interesting thing in a life with very little interesting in it, and he was not willing to give it back. And it was that watching was the one thing he was good at, the one thing that was only his, and here at last was something worth watching. A boy who is given nothing does not easily let go of the one thing he has found for himself. So he stayed, and the men came out each with a case, both cases going the heavy way and left by their 2 directions, and Harry counted to 300 this time before he moved and went home and thought. The thing he needed, he decided, was to get closer to the gold, because that was what he thought it was. He had reasoned his way to it the night before, lying in the cupboard, and the reasoning went like this. The cases went in light and came out heavy. Whatever was heavy was in number 6. It was worth two grown men arranging to meet in secret in the middle of the afternoon to carry away a case at a time. It did not fill the cases so full they were hard to carry, so it was heavy for its size, which meant it was dense, which meant Harry knew about dense things. He had lifted the coal, it was metal. And metal that grown men carried away in secret cases and did not want anyone to see was, in every story Harry had ever heard and every count he could make, one of two things, money or gold, which for Harry were nearly the same word because he had never had either. Gold. There was gold in number 6, and two men were taking it away by the caseload, and one of them could open locks by showing them his keys. Harry did not have a plan for what to do about this. He was 6. What was he going to do? Tell a policeman there was a wizard with gold in the lockups? Because that was the word that had crept into his thoughts and would not leave. Wizard. It was a story word, a pantomime word, and Harry did not believe in stories because stories were things Aunt Petunia said he made up, and he had trained himself out of them. But he had watched a padlock take itself apart in the air, and there was no other word for the man who did it, and a boy who counts honestly must count the answer even when the answer is a word from a story. A wizard, all right, say it was a wizard, two wizards. Say the world had wizards in it, the way it had electricity in it, which Harry could not see either, but which made the lights come on. That did not change what Harry could do about it, which was nothing, so he set the word down carefully next to his other facts and got on with watching, because watching was all he had, and because he had begun to feel, though he would not have used the word, that somebody ought to be watching these two, and that as far as he could tell, out of the whole of England, he was the only one who was. That was a large feeling for a small person. He carried it anyway. He was used to carrying things too big for him. The gold gave itself to him in the end, by accident, which is how the best things and the worst things both tend to arrive. It was a hot, still Thursday, and the counting man had come alone, and Harry was in his substation alley spot with his slice of number 6, and when the man came out with his heavy case, he did something he had not done before. He set the case down on the concrete to fetch his keys for the padlock, and the case, being set down carelessly by a man who was thinking about the lock and not the case, tipped just slightly on the uneven ground, and its catch, a cheap catch Harry saw, an ordinary catch, the one ordinary thing about the whole business, sprang. The lid came up 2 inches, something bright slid. And one round bright thing rolled out off the edge of the case across the concrete and came to rest in a crack near the drain, 20 feet from Harry, flashing in the sun. The counting man did not notice. He was showing the padlock his keys. His back was half to the case. He shut it up again. He closed the lid, thumbed the catch, and this time held his hand flat over the catch and said his quiet nothing, and Harry understood, watching, that the man had fixed the cheap catch with a word so it would not spring again. Then he took up the case and walked away up Wisteria Walk and never knew that he had left one behind. Harry looked at the bright thing in the crack by the drain for a long time. He knew he should leave it. Leaving it was the sensible thing, the safe thing, the thing that kept the garages his and kept him a shabby boy going nowhere. If the man ever counted his gold and found one short and came back looking, a bright thing found in a boy's pocket would be the end of the boy. Harry understood this with great clarity. He understood it, and he went and got the coin anyway, low and quick, 3 steps out and 3 steps back, as he'd practiced being gone, and had it in his fist before he had finished telling himself not to. It was a coin. Of course it was a coin. But it was not a coin like the 10 pences Harry had held, the warm, worn, ordinary coins of the ordinary world. It was gold, real gold, he was sure of it, gold the color of the top of a trifle, gold that was heavy in a way that made his hand know at once it was worth something. On one side there was a face he did not know, stern and long, and around the edge, writing in the letters he did not read, and on the other side a set of scales, and below the scales a number, and small under the number that same mark, the crossed circle with the tail, that was scratched on the door of number 6. Harry held it in the shade of the alley and turned it in his fingers, and it was beautiful, and it was the first thing he had ever owned that anyone else would want, and he loved it a little, the way you love a thing that is only yours. And then he noticed it was wrong. He did not notice it all at once. He noticed it the way you notice a picture is hung crooked. First you only feel that something is off, and then you find it. He held the coin up in the slice of sun at the alley's mouth to see the stern face better, and the sun came through the gap and fell on the coin and on his own hand holding it, and his hand threw a shadow on the wall, a good blackhand shadow with 5 fingers, and the coin did not. Harry turned his hand. He held the coin flat, edge on, then face on. His fingers made their shadow dark and honest. Where the coin was, the shadow had a hole in it, a coin-shaped nothing, a paleness, as if the sun went half through the coin and only half caught. A real coin makes a real shadow. Harry had never once in his life thought about the shadow a coin makes, because why would you? A coin makes a coin shadow. That is simply what happens. This coin made a ghost of one. He stood in the alley and moved his hand up and down in the bar of sun, and watched the true shadow of his fingers and the untrue shadow of the coin, over and over until he was certain, because being certain was the thing Harry did instead of being comforted. The gold in number 6 was not gold. or it was gold that was pretending, gold with something wrong at the middle of it, gold that could not throw a proper shadow because there was a lie inside it where the weight of a real thing ought to be. And two men were carrying it away by the caseload secretly in the middle of an ordinary English summer, out of a lock-up garage behind Wisteria Walk. You did not carry real gold out of a place a case at a time, hiding it. Real gold you carried in. You hid the getting of it, not the having. But you might, Harry thought, turning it, you might carry false gold out very carefully indeed, if you meant to give it to somebody or put it somewhere in place of the real. He could not finish the thought. It went off into the dark past the edge of what a 6-year-old knows about the world. But he had the shape of it as he'd had the shape of a plan when the second man came. A badness with a direction to it, pointing away from these garages towards some larger place he could not see. He put the coin deep in the toe of his shoe under his foot, where nothing was ever found, because nobody looked at Harry's shoes except to complain about them. And he walked home the long way round, past the church, and stopped under the church clock and stood a while looking up at it without knowing quite why, only that the clock counted things too, the whole town's hours, tick by tick, and Harry felt an odd kinship with it standing there, 2 counters in a town full of people who did not count anything they were not made to. The clock said 5:10. Harry noted it. He noted everything now. He had crossed some line without meaning to, from a boy who watched for something to do into a boy who watched because it mattered, and he did not have the words for that crossing, but he felt the ground change under him all the same, the way you feel a hill start before you can see the top. 2 days later the Dursleys went to Dudley's cousin's christening, which was on Aunt Petunia's side and which Harry was not wanted at, and so Harry was left, as he was always left, with Mrs. Figg. Mrs. Figg lived 2 streets over on Wisteria Walk, 4 doors from the mouth of the alley that led to the garages, which Harry had known for a long time and had never once thought to connect to anything until now. Her house smelled of boiled cabbage and cats. She had a great many cats, with names Harry could never keep straight, Tibbles and Snowy and Mr. Paws and one called Tufty who did not like anyone, and she made Harry look at photograph albums of the cats, album after album, and gave him cake that tasted of the tin it lived in. It was, everyone agreed, a dreadful way to spend a day, and Harry had spent a great many of them there, and had learned to pass the time as he passed all his time, by watching. He had never, before that summer, had anything to compare Mrs. Figg to. Now he did, and sitting on her sagging settee with a plate of tin cake going soft in his hand, half listening to her tell him which cat was which, Harry found himself watching Mrs. Figg as he had learned to watch the counting man, and seeing for the first time the things about her that did not fit. There was, for one, the smell under the cabbage. It was not a cat's smell. It came strongest near the cupboard by the back door, a green sharp smell like cut grass and pepper and something Harry had no name for, and when he had once, years ago, gone to that cupboard looking for the lavatory, Mrs. Figg had come across the room faster than an old woman in slippers had any business moving and steered him away by the shoulder, and the cupboard had rattled behind her, full of glass by the sound of it. There were, for another, the letters. Mrs. Figg got letters that did not come by the postman. Harry had seen one arrive that very afternoon, not through the door but somehow simply there on the mat, a stiff yellowish envelope with no stamp, and Mrs. Figg had gone quite still when she saw it and put down her tea and taken it into the kitchen and read it standing up with her back to him and burned it in the sink. Harry had watched her burn it in the reflection of the dark telly. People do not burn their post in the sink. Not ordinary people with ordinary post, and there was the cat that was not a cat. Harry noticed it while Mrs. Figg was in the kitchen with her letter. One of the cats, a big gray one, a tom with a squashed ugly face, was sitting on the windowsill looking out at the street, and it was not sitting the way cats sit, loose and folded and half asleep. It sat up straight on all 4 feet, its head turning slowly along the length of the road, left to right and back, and it watched a man walk his dog past the gate the whole way, turning to keep him in view, the way a person watches, the way a guard watches, and when a car came round the corner it looked at the car and then went back to the pavement, checking, sorting, keeping count. Harry knew a watcher when he saw one. He had become one. And that gray tom on the windowsill was watching Wisteria Walk with the flat, patient attention of somebody whose whole job was to watch it, and Harry sat very still on the settee and watched the cat watch the street, and understood that Mrs. Figg's house, which he had thought the most boring house in England, was keeping some kind of guard on this street, and had been perhaps the whole of his life. He did not know what it meant. He put it with his other facts. He was getting a great many facts now, and no shelf to keep them on, and no one to give them to. But he had noticed long ago that a fact you cannot use is still worth having, because you never know which of your facts will turn out to be the one that matters. So he took it, Mrs. Figg, the burned letters, the green sharp smell, the cat that stood watch, and he set it down carefully next to the counting man and the false coin and the mark on the door, and he ate his soft cake and said nothing, and let Mrs. Figg think, as everyone thought, that there was not much going on behind Harry Potter's eyes. There was a great deal going on behind Harry Potter's eyes. It was only that he had learned, before he learned almost anything else, that this was a thing best kept to himself. When the Dursleys came to collect him, Uncle Vernon did not get out of the car, and Mrs. Figg walked Harry to the gate with a hand on his shoulder, and at the gate she stopped and looked down at him with her watery eyes gone suddenly sharp and said, "You want to stay out of those garages, Harry Potter." Just like that, mild as milk, no more than a caution to mind the road. "Thing down there for a boy, you keep to the park." And she gave his shoulder the smallest squeeze and let him go, and Harry got into the car and did not look back and kept his face as flat and empty as the top of the biscuit tin the whole way home. She knew. That was the fact he carried into the cupboard that night, bigger than all the others. Mrs. Figg knew there was something in the garages and did not want him near it, and had a cat that stood watch on the street and burned her letters in the sink. She was in it somehow or near it, on the edge of it, the way Harry was on the edge of it. And she had told him to stay away, which meant she wanted no part of it for him, and a grown person who kept her distance from those garages was worth more to Harry than 100 facts, because it meant he had been right all along to think the drop on the other side was a long one. That night, locked in his cupboard, Harry did his sums. Fact 1, there was a man who could open locks by showing them his keys, and a second man, big and still, and the two of them met in secret at a garage. Fact 2, the garage held gold, and men carried the gold away in cases, going in light and coming out heavy. Fact 3, the gold was false, it threw the wrong shadow. Harry took the coin out of his shoe and held it up in the strip of hall light under the door, and even in that thin light he could see that where his fingers laid their shadow on the cupboard floor, the coin laid down something less, a gray ghost, a coin that was ashamed of itself. Fact 4, and this was the one he had not let himself hold up to the light until now, alone in the dark where nobody could take it from him. The men had made a plan. Everything they did was measured, arranged, timed. You do not make a false thing to keep it. You make a false thing to pass it off as a true thing, to put it somewhere the true thing ought to be, so that when someone counts, the count comes out right and the true thing is already gone. Harry knew about making a count come out right. He had watched Dudley take from the biscuit tin and then even up the crumbs so Aunt Petunia would not see, and he had watched Aunt Petunia not see, because grown people trust a count that comes out even and never think to weigh the biscuits. Somebody somewhere was going to weigh their biscuits and find the count even and never know the real ones were gone. Harry did not know where, he did not know when. He did not know who the gold belonged to or who was going to lose it, and he was 6 and small and lived in a cupboard and had exactly one ally in the whole business, which was a false coin in the toe of his shoe. But he lay in the dark and he held the shape of the thing in his mind, all 4 facts stacked up clean, and he made himself a promise, the way children make promises to themselves in the dark, not out loud because out loud was dangerous, but down where the numbers lived, where it was safe. He was going to find out, he was going to watch until he understood the whole of it. And then he was going to find somebody. There had to be somebody in a world that turned out to have wizards in it. There had to be somebody whose job it was to mind, and he was going to tell them in order all his facts so plainly that even a grown person would have to believe him. It did not once occur to him that the somebody, when he found them, would not be a person at all. It did not occur to him that the count being cheated was the oldest and best guarded count in the whole of the hidden world, kept in a place he had never heard of, by a people who had been counting since before there was an England to count in. He was 6. He knew about milk bottles and biscuit tins and the shadow a true coin throws. It was, as it turned out, exactly enough to begin with. He put the coin back in his shoe. He slept. And in the morning the promise had survived the night, which was how Harry knew it was real. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, a book of clues. The trouble with knowing things, Harry discovered that summer, was that a thing you knew and could not write down had to be carried in your head all day, and a head is not a safe place when there are people in the house who look inside yours whenever they please. So he made a book. It was not much of a book. It was 6 pages torn from the back of an old exercise book that had been Dudley's and thrown out because Dudley had scribbled a rude word on the front, and Harry had rescued it from the bin under the cover of taking the bin out, which was one of his jobs. The pages were the clean ones. He had a stub of pencil sharpened with a kitchen knife when Aunt Petunia was watching the television, and he had, for a cover, a folded square of the shiny card that cornflakes came in, because shiny card did not go soft in a shoe. The problem after that was words. Harry could read more or less and could write his letters slowly, but writing took a long time and it made shapes anyone could read, and if Aunt Petunia found a paper that said the gray man opens locks with no key she would burn it, and then she would ask Harry why he had written such a wicked lie, and there would be no supper for a week. So Harry did not write words, he made a code. The gray man he drew as a tall, thin capital I because the man stood like that, straight up and narrow. The big still man he drew as a filled-in square because the man was wide and shut like a door. The days he kept in tally marks, 5 and a gate, the way you kept a score, and next to each day he put a small sun if it was afternoon and a small half-moon if it was late. When the man went in he drew a little arrow pointing at the door, and when the man came out heavy, he drew the arrow coming back with a dot on it, the dot being the case, and if the case had gone in he left the dot off. to anyone who found it, like the scribbling of a small boy who liked to draw arrows and suns, which was exactly what Harry wanted it to look like. That touch was his favorite part of the whole book, and he told no one because a thing that gets noticed is a thing that gets taken. He kept the book under the third paving slab along the side path, the one that rocked, in a bread bag against the wet. He learned to lift the slab with 2 fingers under the near edge and set it down without a sound. He practiced until he could do it in the dark. A place to hide a thing is worth more than the thing, he had decided, because you can always get another thing, but a hiding place that nobody knows is the rarest treasure there is, and Harry had exactly one. With the book, the counting could grow. Over the next 11 days he logged the gray man 9 times and the square man 4, and the shape he had been unable to see began very slowly to show itself, the way a picture shows itself when you rub a pencil over a coin under paper. The gray man never came 2 days running, he never came on a Sunday, and when Harry laid the tally against the days of the week, and then against the little suns and moons, he found that the gaps between the gray man's visits were shrinking. At the start of the summer there had been 3 days between visits, then sometimes 2. Now it was every second day, and twice it had been 2 days one after another, with only the night between, which broke the never 2 days running rule the gray man had kept so carefully before. Whatever the men were doing, they were doing more of it, and faster, and a thing that speeds up is a thing coming to an end. Harry did not know the end of what. But he knew the feeling of a countdown because he lived by one every day, counting the seconds of Uncle Vernon's face, and a countdown has a particular smell to it, and the garages had begun to smell of it. He found the ruler at last, the one that measured the men's days, and it was not a ruler at all. It was a clock. He worked it out standing under the church on his long way round, waiting for nothing, counting the pigeons on the weather vane. The church clock struck the hour, 4 slow strokes, and something in the count of it snagged on something in his memory, and he stood still and pulled the 2 threads until they came together. The gray man arrived on the hour, always on the hour, not near it, not about it, on it. Harry had written the little suns and moons in his book, but he had not written the hours because he had not thought the hours mattered, and now he saw that the hours were the whole of it. He went back through the book in his head, day by day, and set each visit against the church clock as best he could remember, and the gray man had come at 3, and at 4, and at 5, and once at noon, and never at 10 past or half past or a quarter to, but on the stroke every time, and the striking of the clock might have been a hand that opened the door. It made a cold kind of sense once he had it. The men carried no watches Harry had ever seen. The gray man's wrist was bare under his gray cuff, and Voss wore gloves, and Crane's hands hung empty. They were people who did not carry the ordinary world's machines, and so they borrowed the town's one great machine, the church clock up on its tower that struck the hours over all of Little Winging whether you wanted them or not, and they set their secret business to its bells, because a bell carried through a shut garage door, and a bell needed no winding, and a bell told the same time to all 3 of them at once without a word passing between them. It was clever. Nearly everything they did was clever. And it had a hole in it, and the hole was Harry's, because Harry, who counted the town's hours since no one else would, knew a thing about that clock that perhaps no one else in Little Winging had ever troubled to learn. The church clock was fast, 4 minutes fast, and had been all summer and longer. Harry knew because he checked it against the clock in the corner shop and against the 6 pips on Aunt Petunia's radio that meant the start of the news, and the church was always 4 minutes ahead of the pips, striking its hour while the true hour was still 4 minutes off. Nobody minded. Nobody set their life by the church clock in Little Winging. They had the telly and the radio and the works hooter. Only Harry minded because Harry minded all the numbers nobody else did, and so only Harry knew that the men who set their secret business to the church bells were setting it, every single time, 4 minutes early, and did not know it, and could not know it, because to know it you had to be a boy with nothing to do but count a clock that lied. He did not know yet what a 4-minute lie was worth. He drew it in the book all the same, a little clock face with its hands at 4 minutes past the 12, because a fact you cannot use is still worth having, and this one had the particular weight of a fact that would matter later. He could feel the weight of it. He had learned to feel which facts were heavy. Then on the 12th day there was the woman. She did not come the way the men came. Harry almost missed her because he was watching the door of number 6, and she did not go to number 6, not at first. A black taxi stopped at the top of Wisteria Walk by the post box, which was odd in itself because nobody took a taxi to Wisteria Walk. You took a taxi to somewhere, and Wisteria Walk was nowhere. A woman got out and paid the driver through the window and did not wait for change, and the taxi went, and the woman stood a moment by the post box and looked down the length of the road once slowly, the whole length of it, gate by gate, and Harry, in the mouth of the substation alley, made himself part of the wall. She was tall, and she wore a long coat the color of a wet slate roof, buttoned, though the day was warm, and gloves, thin dark gloves, in July. She carried a case, but not the flat black cases the men carried. Hers was slim and stiff, and she held it the way you hold a thing you have made yourself and do not trust anyone else to carry. She came down the road without hurrying and without dawdling, at the gray man's measured pace, the pace of someone counting her own steps, and Harry understood that she was one of them before she ever reached the garages because she walked in their time. She did not knock at number 6. She stopped in front of it and set her slim case down and drew off one glove and laid her bare hand flat against the door beside the little scratched mark and stood so for the space of 3 breaths, and the door rolled up in front of her without a sound. Then she was inside and the door came down and Wisteria Walk was empty again, and Harry let his breath out slowly through his nose and found that he had bitten a small hurt into the inside of his cheek without noticing. He waited. She was inside a long time, longer than the men ever stayed, near an hour. And while she was inside twice, the gap under the door of number 6 lit up, not with the yellow of an electric bulb. It was a white light, quick and cold, there and gone, once and then a while later once again, and after the second time the smell reached him, carried on the warm still air down the row. A green sharp smell, cut grass and pepper and something underneath he had no word for, the same smell that lived in Mrs. Figg's cupboard by the back door. Harry sat very still with that smell in his nose and let his mind do the thing it did, which was to lay 2 facts side by side and see if they were the same fact wearing 2 coats. The smell was at Mrs. Figg's, the smell was here, the white light was here. Mrs. Figg burned her letters in the sink and kept a cat that stood guard and had told him to keep away from the garages. The gray man opened locks with a word. The coin in his shoe would not throw a shadow. All of it, every piece, smelled of the same green pepper smell, which meant, Harry thought, that all of it was the same kind of thing, the way everything in a chemist's shop smells faintly of the chemist's even when it comes in different bottles. There was a kind of thing in the world, a whole kind that he had not known about, and it had a smell, and once you knew the smell you could not stop finding it. When the woman came out she had her glove back on and her case in her hand, and the case, Harry noted, was heavier going out than coming in, held lower, the arm gone stiff. So she brought something empty and took something full, and she was the only one of the 3 who did that, because the men took the finished coins away and she, Harry was nearly sure, brought the coins in the first place, made somewhere else and carried here, or made here and carried off to be finished. He could not yet tell which. He drew her in the book as a tall, thin capital, I like the gray man, because she stood like that too, but he put a small circle on top of it, a head with the hair pinned up so he would know her from the gray man. Then he added, under the day's tally, a new mark he had been saving for something important, a single dot inside a ring, which meant the smell and the light, which meant, in Harry's private language, magic, though he did not write the word and would not have written it if he could. 3 of them now. The gray eye, the black square, the ringed eye with her slim case and her bare hand on the door, and a plan that was speeding up. He needed to understand the coins better. That was the next thing. He did his experiments at night in the cupboard by the strip of hall light and a torch he had taken from the kitchen drawer and not given back, a small torch that Aunt Petunia thought had been lost. He laid the false coin on the cupboard floor beside a real 10-pence he had found in the street 3 winters ago and kept for no reason he could have named until now, and he looked at the 2 of them together, and the false one was more beautiful and more wrong, and both of those grew the longer he looked. First he weighed them. He had made a balance from a wooden ruler laid across a cotton reel, a seesaw, and he put a coin on each end. The gold coin was heavier, which it should be, being bigger, so that told him nothing except that it was honestly heavy, which somehow made the rest of its dishonesty worse. Then he did the water. He filled a jam jar from the bathroom tap when he was let out to wash and carried it back cupped against being seen, and he dropped the real 10-pence in and watched it fall and settle and send its little shiver up through the water, a ripple that crossed the top and came back. Then he dropped the gold coin in. It fell, it settled, and the top of the water did not move. Not a ripple, not a shiver, nothing, as though the coin had gone into the water without disturbing it, the water agreeing beforehand to pretend the coin was not there. Harry looked at the still flat top of the water for a long time, and he did the real coin again to be sure, and the real coin made its ripple honest every time, and the gold coin went in like a secret, and the water kept the secret for it. Last he did the magnet. Dudley had a horseshoe magnet from a Christmas cracker, red painted, in the bottom of the toy box among the broken things, and Dudley would never miss it because Dudley never played with anything twice. Harry knew that a coin is not magnetic. He had tried the magnet on his 10-pence long ago, and the coin had ignored it as coins do. He tried it now to be sure, and the 10-pence lay there and did not care. Then he brought the magnet slow toward the gold coin where it lay face up on the floor. The coin turned over. It did not slide to the magnet or jump to it, which is what an iron thing would do. It turned once unhurried, flipping from its face to its back and lying still again, and then when Harry moved the magnet away and brought it close a second time, it turned again, back to its face, the stern long face looking up, and Harry understood, with the torch shaking a little in his hand, that the coin was not being pulled. It was showing itself. When the magic came near, the false coin turned to show its handsome face, its stern man and its scales, the parts that were meant to be seen, the parts that lied, and it hid its back, and it did this the way a person straightens up and smiles when the important guest comes into the room. It wanted to be believed. Somebody had made it wanting to be believed, and that, Harry thought, sitting in the dark with a Christmas cracker magnet in his fist, was the coldest thing he had learned yet, more than the locks, more than the light, that you could make a thing that wanted to fool you and set it loose, and it would go on wanting to fool you all by itself when its makers were nowhere near. He put the coin back in his shoe. He did not do any more experiments after that. He had learned what he needed, which was that the coins were made to pass, made cleverly, made to answer the tests the magic world would put to them and pass those too, and so the people who made them knew exactly what tests would be put and where. You do not build a coin that fools the magic unless you mean to hand it to the magic and have the magic weigh it. And there was only one place, Harry was fairly sure by now, where the magic weighed gold in the quantities 2 men could carry off by the caseload for weeks. He did not know its name. He knew it was a bank, because a bank was where gold was weighed and kept and counted, and Harry knew about banks as he knew about aeroplanes from a distance, as things that existed for other people. Somewhere there was a bank for the magic, and somebody was going to weigh false gold there and find it good. 2 days after the coin turned itself over under the magnet, the Dursleys went to look at a bigger house they could not afford, and Harry went to Mrs. Figg's, and this time he did not spend the afternoon being shown the cats. This time he watched Mrs. Figg and picked his moment and asked her a question, which was a thing he almost never did because questions cost. He waited until she was pouring the tea, both her hands busy, her eyes on the pot, and he said in his flattest, dullest, least worth noticing voice, looking at the cat and not at her, "Mrs. Figg, what's the little people?" The pot stopped. Only for a moment a hitch, the spout held still above the cup with the tea not pouring, and then it went on and the tea came out and she set the pot down and said, light as anything, "Little people. Fairies, you mean, at the bottom of the garden." "There's no such thing, dear, that's just stories," and she pushed the cup at him, and her hand was not quite steady on the saucer, and the saucer chattered once against the cup before she took her hand away. Harry looked at the tea. He had not said fairies. He had said little people, and she had answered a question he had not asked, which is what grown-ups do when the real question is one they cannot afford. They answer a smaller one quickly and hope you forget the big one. He had done it himself to teachers. He knew the move from the inside. "I heard someone say it," he said, still dull, still watching the cat. "The little folk and their letters going in a drawer." The room went very quiet. The gray Tom on the sill turned its head and looked at Harry, both of them looking at him now, the old woman and the cat. And something in Mrs. Figg's face that had always been soft and vague and full of cats went still and old and hard there and gone, a second face under the first, and Harry saw it and understood that Mrs. Figg was not what she looked like any more than the coin was, that she had a back to her that she kept turned away, and that he had just made her show it. "Where did you hear that?" she said. It was not a question, it was flat and low, and it had no cats in it at all. "On the telly," Harry said, which was the sort of lie grown-ups liked because it explained everything and asked nothing, and he made his eyes big and empty and let his mouth hang a little, doing the not quite right boy Aunt Petunia told the shop woman about, and he watched Mrs. Figg decide whether to believe him. She decided to pretend to. That was the most he ever got from grown-ups, the pretending. She sat down across from him and took his hand, which she had never done, her fingers dry and light as a bird's foot, and she said quietly, "You listen to me, Harry Potter. There are things in this world that mind you, that watch over you whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not, and their business is to keep you small and safe and out of the way of harm, and the best thing, the very best thing you can do, is to stay small and safe and out of the way, and let the ones whose job it is do the minding. Do you understand me?" Harry said yes. He did understand her better than she wanted, which was that somebody somewhere had made it Mrs. Figg's job to keep him small and out of the way, and that the same somebody would not want to hear that Harry had found the garages, and that if Mrs. Figg carried what Harry had let slip today back to the somebody, then Harry's watching was over, and the men would go on to the 9th, and nobody would ever weigh the biscuits. So he stayed small and safe and dull all the rest of that afternoon, and let her show him the cats and ate the tin cake, and said nothing else worth burning a letter over. But he had learned 2 things, and they were heavy ones. Mrs. Figg had a second face, and there were people whose whole job was to keep him from doing exactly the thing he had decided to do. Something changed in the gray man the week the woman first came, and Harry, who read changes in grown men as easily as other children read the pictures in a book, caught it on the second day. The gray man came out of number 6 on the stroke of 4 with his heavy case, and he did not leave. He set the case against the door and he stood, and he looked up the row, and then down it once each way, unhurried, thorough, the look of a man checking a sum he has already added twice. Harry was in the alley mouth in his slice of number 6 spot, and he did the thing he always did, went still, became wall. But the gray man's look did not slide over the alley the way a look slides over a place it expects to be empty. It stopped. It rested on the dark mouth of the alley for one breath, too, and Harry, pressed to the cold brick, made himself a shadow among shadows and did not so much as blink, because a blink is a movement, and movement is what the eye is built to catch. The gray man came toward the alley. He came without hurrying, which was worse than hurrying, at his measured counting pace, one hand loose at his side, and Harry did the arithmetic in the half-second he had. 3 steps to the back of the alley, a wall at the end too high, a gap in the fence on the left, 4 feet along, low, a squeeze. Behind, the substation and its locked gate. The gray man was 40 feet off and closing at the speed of a walk, and a walk eats 40 feet in no time at all, and if Harry ran now the running would be seen, and a running boy is a boy who was hiding, and a boy who was hiding is a listener, and there is no inspector now. So he did not run. He turned, unhurried, a bored child drifting out the back of a boring alley, and he went to the fence gap not as an escape but as a shortcut, the shortcut of a boy who used it every day, and put himself through it sideways with his cheek against the splintered wood and the nails snagging his jumper. And on the other side was the allotments, green and open and full of the ordinary world, runner beans and a man in a flat cap turning a fork. Harry came out among the beans at a dawdle with his hands in his pockets and his eyes on the ground, another nobody's child taking the cut through home, and he did not look back, because looking back was the last thing that would give him away, and he had learned every other thing not to do, so he made himself not do that one either. He heard nothing behind him. He did not know whether the gray man had come to the fence and looked through, or turned back at the alley's end, or stood there yet, reading the gap in the boards, the snag of wool on the nail, the scuff where a child had gone through. He walked the length of the allotments with his back a wide cold target and his ears straining, and nothing came, no word, no hand, and at the far gate he let himself out onto Magnolia Road among the prams and the shopping and was, for that moment, only a boy again. But something had changed, and he said it in the book that night as best his code could hold it, a small open eye, which meant they were looking now, not for him. They did not know it was a boy. If they had known it was a boy, the gray man would not have walked. He would simply have been there as he was there at the padlock without seeming to have moved between. They knew only that a garage they had thought unwatched might be watched, and men who learn that do 2 things Harry understood, lying in the dark. They grow careful. And they grow quick. The gray man had said it himself, through the wall, in the dry voice that dropped when it mattered. A man who speaks in the same place too often is a man someone has learned to listen to. They had felt the listener now, the shape of him, the possibility of him, and they would not wait to learn his name. They would finish and go and finish faster, which meant the outside spots were dead to him. The alley, the allotment wall, the substation mouth, all of them burned, all of them watched now by men who watched everything twice. If he wanted more, and he wanted more, he would have to watch from a place no one on the row would think to look, which was inside the row itself, behind the one door that stood open, among the pigeons and the dead car, where the sound gathered. The next thing he needed was words. He had shapes and smells and coins that turned to be admired, but he had no words yet, none of theirs, and words were where the plan lived. So he decided to get closer, which he knew was the stupid thing, and did it anyway, because getting closer was the only door left. He chose number 9. The open garage with the dead car had a gap under its door where the concrete had sunk, and if he lay flat behind the rusted wheel arch, he could see a slice of the row, and more to the point he could hear, because sound came down that row of brick and metal boxes and gathered. And voices from number 6 carried 3 doors down if the men forgot to keep them low, and men who think they are alone forget. He went in the early afternoon before any of them, and he made a nest of himself behind the car with the pigeon smell thick around him and the tickle of old feathers, and he waited, and this was the hardest waiting he had done, because now he was inside the trap he was watching, not outside it, and there was only the one door. The gray man came first. Harry heard the padlock do its silent thing and the door roll up, and then footsteps, one set, going in, and the door came down, and for a long while there was nothing but a man alone in a garage making no sound. Then the second set, the heavy even tread, the square man, and the 2 of them were 3 doors off with a wall between, and Harry pressed the side of his head to the cold concrete and shut his eyes to hear better, the way you turn a radio to find the station. At first it was only weather, only nothing, low words with no edges. Then the square man said something that came clear all at once, the way 1 word in 10 will jump the distance. Told you the 9th, it has to be the 9th, there isn't another for 10 years. And the gray man, whose voice Harry had never heard until now, and which was quiet and even and dry like paper turning. I heard you the first time, Crane. I am not the one who needs telling. Voss needs telling. If her count is off by a single coin, the whole tally rings, and we are all of us finished before the first cart moves. Crane. So the square man was Crane, and the woman was Voss, and Harry lay in the feathers and the dust and held the names as though they might slip through his fingers, Crane and Voss, and turned his ear back to the wall. The deep locks, Crane was saying. You keep saying the deep locks won't hold. I want to hear you say why they'll open. Because on the night of the reckoning they open themselves. The gray voice did not rise. If anything it dropped, and Harry had to hold his breath to catch it. Once in 10 years they take the old wards down to lay the new. For one night the deep vaults answer to the writ and the writ alone, and if the writ reads true, and if the gold in the pans reads true, then the doors that have never opened for a wizard in 1,000 years will open for us like the door of a coal shed. That is the whole of it. That is what we are buying with all this patience. One night, 3 bells. And after the 3rd bell the new wards come up and anyone still inside is inside for good, and no one will hear them, not if they scream for 100 years. There was a silence in number 6 then, and in it Harry became aware of his own heart going and of a pigeon somewhere in the roof shifting its feet, and of the fact that he had stopped breathing and had to start again carefully in through the nose so as not to make a sound. And Gru, said Crane, your man upstairs, he holds. Gru holds because Gru has more to lose than we do. Gru has spent 11 years making certain that when the little folk write their complaints, the complaints go into a drawer and the drawer goes into a cupboard and the cupboard is never opened. There was an inspector once who might have made trouble. There is no inspector now. Gru holds. Stop asking me who holds, Crane. Everyone holds. Ask me instead whether the boy has the last of the plates finished, because that is the only thing between us and the 9th. Voss says 2 more days. Then in 2 more days we're ready, and we will not speak in this place again, because a man who speaks in the same place twice too often is a man someone has learned to listen to. Harry, 3 doors away, flat in the dust behind a dead car, felt the cold of that go down through him like water through the false coin without a ripple, all the way to the bottom. A man someone has learned to listen to. He had learned to listen to them. He had learned it so well that he could name their days and draw their faces and knew, now, more than he had any way to carry. The 9th, the reckoning, the deep locks, the writ, the pans, Gru upstairs who put the little folks' letters in a drawer, the boy finishing the plates. He did not understand the half of it. But he understood the shape, and the shape was a mouth, and it was open, and it was going to close on the 9th of something, and everything the men did was to make sure it closed clean. He should go. The moment they left he should go and never come back, because he had what he came for and more, and the gray man had just said, in his dry turning paper voice, the truest thing Harry had heard all summer, that they knew in their bones that somewhere there might be a listener, and that a listener was the one thing they could not allow. But he could not go while they were there, and they did not go for a long time, and while he waited the afternoon light through the door gap went from white to yellow to the color of weak tea, and Harry lay still and did his sums in the dark, and one of the sums was new and he did not like it. The sum was this: everything that could undo the men was small, a single coin off in the count, a single complaint not put in the drawer, a single listener at a wall. Their whole great plan, the caseloads of gold in the 10 years, waiting in the night the locks opened themselves, all of it balanced on 100 small things being exactly right, and any one small thing going wrong would ring the tally and finish them. Which meant a small thing could stop them. Which meant that he who was a small thing, the smallest thing in the whole business, a boy nobody counted, might be the one small thing that could ring the tally and bring the whole mouth crashing shut on empty air. And it also meant, the same sum read the other way, that if they ever found the small thing that could finish them, they would not hesitate over it because it was small. They had made a coin that fooled the magic. They had emptied a drawer of an inspector. Harry did not know what had happened to the inspector, but he knew what the gray man's voice had done to the word, dropped it and left it lying there. There is no inspector now, and he knew that a boy would weigh even less in that voice than an inspector and go into the same drawer and the drawer into the same cupboard, and nobody would open it, not if he screamed for 100 years. He had not, until that afternoon behind the dead car, truly believed he was in danger. He had known it as a fact at arm's length. Now he believed it as a thing in his own chest, cold and heavy and honest, and the believing did not make him want to stop. That was the thing he noticed about himself, lying there and could not explain, that the cold of it and the wanting to know had got tangled together somewhere down inside him until he could not pull one loose without the other coming too. He was afraid. He was going to keep watching. Both of those were true, and he was 6, and he did not have anyone to tell that it was too much for 6, so he simply carried it, because carrying things was what he had instead. The men left at last by their 2 directions, cases going the heavy way. Harry counted to 500. Then he unfolded himself, stiff and full of pins, and crept out under the door gap into a wisteria walk gone violet with dusk, and started home the long way, and that was when he saw that he was not the only one watching the garages. There was a figure at the far end of the row, in the deep shadow where the brick met the fence, small, no taller than Harry himself, but not a child. It stood wrong for a child, planted, patient, its head turned toward number 6 with the flat, unblinking attention Harry had seen on the gray cat at Mrs. Figg's window. It wore something dark and close-fitting, a hood or a cap, and its hands, which hung at its sides, were long, the fingers too long, and it did not move, and it did not know Harry was there, or it did not care, because all of its watching was pointed at the shut door of number 6 with the little scratched mark, the crossed circle with the tail that was also on the coin in Harry's shoe. Harry stood very still in the violet dark, and the small figure watched the garage, and neither of them moved, and Harry understood 2 things at once. The first was that somebody else knew. Out of the whole of England, he was not, after all, the only one. Somebody else had learned to listen at these garages, somebody small and long-fingered who smelled, even at this distance, even under the dusk and the dust, of cut grass and pepper and the thing beneath. The second thing he understood was that he did not know whose side the small figure was on, and that not knowing was a new kind of danger, a fourth shape to add to the gray eye and the black square and the ringed woman, and he had no drawing for it yet. He backed away one careful step, and another, keeping the fence between himself and the shadow, and when the corner of the substation hid him he turned and went, not running, never running, walking the empty boy walk with his heart going like a fist on a door, all the way home to number 4 in the cupboard in the dark, where he lay awake a long time with the false coin cold against the sole of his foot, thinking about long fingers in the shadow, and letters that went into a drawer and a drawer into a cupboard. And the 9th of a month he could not name, coming closer 2 days now, and the mouth of it standing open, and himself the smallest thing in all of it, a boy nobody counted, lying in the dark and knowing more than anyone alive was supposed to know, and having nowhere in the whole world to set it down. In the morning the cold of it had survived the night, and so had the wanting, and Harry got up and did his jobs and slipped the leash and went to find out whose side the long-fingered watcher was on, because that was the next door, and Harry had never in his life been able to leave a door shut once he had found it. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. The auditor getting out of the cupboard at night was the first secret Harry had ever kept that could have got him properly hurt, and he had kept it for 2 years without once being tempted to use it until now. The cupboard bolted from the outside, a little brass bolt shot across at bedtime by whoever remembered, and a bolt on the outside is a hard thing for a boy on the inside, but the door of the cupboard did not sit flush. There was a gap along the top edge, a finger's width, where the frame had warped, and through that gap, if you had a length of stiff wire and a great deal of patience and hands small enough, you could reach up and over and coax the bolt back along its keep, a hair at a time, without a sound. Harry had a length of wire from the innards of an old spiral notebook. He had worked out the trick of it one long night when he could not sleep for hunger, not because he meant to go anywhere, but because it was a thing to solve, and Harry solved things the way other children collected them. Then he had shot the bolt home again and told no one, richer by a secret and hungrier by nothing at all. He used it now. He waited until the house had gone through all its night noises, the telly off, the stairs creaking under Uncle Vernon, the cistern, the long settling quiet, and then a full hour more by the count in his head, and then he reached the wire up through the gap and worked the bolt in the dark with his tongue between his teeth, and it came, a hair and a hair and a hair, and gave. He went out through the kitchen, the back door key being kept foolishly on a hook beside the door, and into a garden gone silver and strange, and over the side gate rather than through it because the gate had a squeak he had never been able to cure, and out into a little winging he had never seen. The town at night was a different country. The street lamps made pools of orange with dark between them, and Harry went from dark to dark, keeping out of the pools, because a boy in a pool of light at midnight is a story the whole street will tell in the morning, and a boy in the dark is nothing at all. It was 3 streets to Wisteria Walk, he counted them. Counting kept his feet steady and his head clear, and he needed both, because the closer he got to the garages the more he felt the thing he had felt in number 9 behind the dead car, the cold water going down through him without a ripple, and he did not slow for it, but he did not pretend it was not there. Church clock struck 12 as he reached the mouth of the alley, and Harry stood in the dark under the wall and remembered that it was lying, that the true midnight was 4 minutes off yet, and the thought steadied him more than anything, because it meant that even here, even now, there was one number in the world that only he had, and a person who has something that is only theirs is never entirely at anyone's mercy. He found his slice of number 6 spot by feel and made himself small in it and watched the row. For a long time there was nothing. The garages stood in their line, blacker shapes against the black, and the pigeons were quiet, and somewhere a fox went over a fence with a soft double thump and was gone, and Harry waited, and the cold of the concrete came up into him, and he was deciding how much longer to give it when the dark by number 6 moved. It did not walk out of the shadow. It was simply between one blink and the next, standing where a moment before there had been only wall, a small close shape no taller than Harry, and it stood in front of the shut door of number 6 with its head bowed toward the little scratched mark, and Harry saw the long hands come up, and one of them laid flat against the door beside the mark, the same gesture the woman Voss had used, but where Voss had opened the door did not open now. It stayed shut. And the small shape stood with its hand on the wood, still as the wood, and Harry understood that it was listening to the door, or reading it, or asking it something, and that it had as little right to be there as Harry did, and that it was not one of them. He should have stayed still. Everything he had taught himself all summer said stay still, become wall, watch and count and carry it home. But he had come to find out whose side the watcher was on, and you cannot find out a thing by watching it stand at a door, and there was a piece of him, the same piece that had gone out into the sun for the fallen coin, that could not leave a door shut once it had found it. So Harry did the stupidest thing he had done all summer, which was also, though he could not have known it, the thing that saved his life and a great deal more besides. He stood up out of his hiding place in the dark, 10 feet from the small, long-fingered shape, and he said very quietly in the flat, careful voice he used for dangerous grown-ups, "They come on the hour, whoever you're waiting for. They come on the hour and never twice in the same day, and there's 3 of them." The shape moved. It moved faster than anything Harry had ever seen a living thing move, faster than Dudley's fist, faster than a cat on a bird, and it was not where it had been, and then it was against him. And there was a hand like a bundle of dry twigs around his throat, not squeezing, only there, and a point of something at the soft place under his jaw, cold and exact. A blade so thin he felt it as a line rather than a thing, and a face an inch from his own in the dark. A face he could not properly see and did not need to see to know it was old and hard and entirely without mercy. There was a smell of cut grass and pepper and iron. Harry did not move. He did not move because there was nowhere to move to, and because moving onto a point like that is a thing you only do once, and because underneath everything he had spent his whole life learning to go still when a bigger creature had him by the throat, and the lesson served him now as it had never served him before. "A child," said the shape. Its voice was low and rough and precise, each word set down like a coin on a counter, and it spoke not as one caught off guard, but as one handed a bad debt it had not agreed to carry. "A human child in the dark who knows the pattern of their coming. Speak plainly and quickly, child, and know that I will hear a lie under your words before you finish saying them, and that I have killed grown wizards this night for less than you have already told me. Who set you to watch this door?" "Nobody set me," Harry said. His voice came out thinner than he wanted, but it came out and it did not shake, or not much. "I found it, in June. I found the door and the man who opens it without a key, and then there was 2 of them, and then the woman, and I've been watching them the whole summer because nobody else was, and I made a book of it, and I heard them talking about the 9th, and the reckoning, and the deep locks, and a man called Gru who puts the little folks' letters in a drawer." He got it all out in one breath, in order, the facts stacked as he stacked them in the dark, because he had promised himself long ago that when he found the somebody he would tell them all his facts so plainly they would have to believe him, and here at last, with a blade under his jaw, was the somebody, and Harry was not going to waste him. "And the coins are false, they don't throw a shadow. I've got one in my shoe." The blade did not move. But something behind the old hard face changed, a recalculation, quick and total, and the hand at his throat opened and was gone, and the small shape stepped back 1 pace and stood looking at him, and now Harry could see, in the orange spill of the far street lamp, what it was. It was not a child and not a man. It was shorter than Harry by a little, but broad, and everything about it was long and clever and made for fine work. The fingers, the sharp face, the dark eyes set close and bright as a bird's, the long nose, the ears drawn to points, the mouth full of small even teeth. It wore close dark clothes with no gleam to them, and a belt hung with things Harry could not name, and it carried itself with an old straight dignity that made Uncle Vernon's puffed-up bigness look, by comparison, like a bullfrog. Harry had read a word for what it was once in one of Dudley's books under a fairy tale picture, and the word was goblin, and he had thought it a made-up word for a made-up thing, and here it was breathing pepper and iron a pace away with a blade somewhere back inside its sleeve, entirely real, and looking at Harry as though Harry were a sum that would not come out even. "Show me the coin," the goblin said. Harry took off his shoe, hopping once on the cold concrete, and dug the false galleon out of the toe, warm from his foot, and held it out on his palm, and the goblin did not take it. It bent over his hand and looked, and its nostrils moved, and then it drew from its belt a small square of dark glass and held the glass between Harry's palm and the street lamp, so that the light came through the glass onto the coin, and it made a sound in its throat, a low sound, part word and part growl, that Harry felt more than heard. "Where the true coin throws a shadow, this throws a lie," the goblin said very quietly, and it was not speaking to Harry now, it was speaking to the coin, to the night, to some ledger only it could see. "Alloyed with nothing that has weight, signed with a hand that has learned our signing. And out here in a nowhere of the wizards, 100 miles from the bank, in a child's shoe." It straightened and fixed Harry with its bird-bright eyes. "Do you know what this is, child? It's false gold," Harry said. "They're making false gold to put where the real gold is, so the count comes out even and nobody knows the real gold's gone. From a bank, the magic bank, I don't know its name." The goblin was silent for the space of 3 breaths, and in the silence Harry heard the church clock ticking somewhere above the town, 4 minutes fast, counting down to nothing. "It has a name," the goblin said at last. "It is called Gringotts. It is the oldest and the safest thing the wizarding world has built, and it is safe because we keep it, and we keep it because a debt kept is the only law that has never once failed us, and no one in 1,000 years, human or otherwise, has taken so much as a single nut out of a deep vault that was not theirs to take. And you are telling me, a child, a wizard-s abandoned whelp with a stolen coin in his shoe, that someone means to." It said this not as a question, but as an accusation, an outrage, blaming Harry for the plot, as a man blames the messenger for the message. "You will tell me your name," Harry, your whole name, Harry Potter. Something moved across the goblin's face and was mastered before Harry could read it, and the goblin's eyes went, for the briefest moment, to the middle of Harry's forehead, to the place under his fringe where the old scar sat that Aunt Petunia said he had got in the car crash that killed his parents. And then the eyes came back down, and the goblin's mouth thinned, and when it spoke again there was a new thing in the low, rough voice, a caution or a weighing. "Of course you are," it said. "Of course the one child in England who cannot keep his nose out of what is not his is that child. The world has a sense of humor, and it is a goblin's humor, which is to say it is cruel and it comes at your expense." It looked at him a moment longer. "I am called Bardock. I am an auditor of Gringotts, which is a thing you will not understand, so I will tell you what it means. It means that when gold in the world does not add up, it is my work to find where the sum went wrong and set it right, and to bring whoever unbalanced it before the reckoning of my people, who are not gentle. False galleons have surfaced in the wizards' markets for 11 months, a few then more, well made. So well made that the tellers pass them, which has not happened in living memory, and a goblin does not sleep once that can be said. I followed the false gold back along its own weight, coin to coin, hand to hand, and the trail led out of London into the Muggle nowhere and stopped 3 nights ago at that door." He nodded at number 6. "It stopped there because I could not open it, warded as it is with our own signing turned against us, and because I had no eyes inside and no way to learn the comings and goings without being seen. I had the door and nothing else. And then a human child stands up out of the dark and hands me the pattern, the faces, the days, the hours, the words, and a coin from their own case, in the time it takes to draw a blade." Bardock's teeth showed, and it was not a smile, though it had the shape of one. "You understand that I do not believe in gifts, child. A gift is a debt wearing a ribbon, so I will ask you the only question that matters, and you will answer it plainly. What do you want?" Harry thought about it. He thought about it properly, as he thought about everything, because he could tell that the goblin would know if he answered too fast, and would know if he lied, and would think less of him for either. And when he had thought about it, he found, though he had not looked to, that the true answer and the safe answer were the same answer, and he gave it. "I want somebody to stop them," Harry said. "That's all. I've been carrying it all summer, and there's nobody to tell, and it's too big for me, and I can't stop them by myself. I'm 6. I just want somebody who can to know what I know so they can stop them. You can have all of it, the book, the coin, the church clock. I don't want anything for it. Everyone wants something for it." "Then I want them stopped," Harry said. "You asked what I want, that's it. I want the count to come out wrong for them after I did all the counting." Bardock looked at him for a long moment, and the bird-bright eyes did not soften because they were not made to soften, but they changed the way a scale changes when the pans come level, a settling, a decision. "That," the goblin said, "is very nearly a goblin's answer. You want justice done and you will forego the profit of it. My people have gone to war for less." He tilted his head. "It will not do you as much good as you think, wanting nothing. A creditor who is owed nothing has no claim on anyone. But it will do for now, and it is more honest than most of what I have heard from grown men in fine robes, so I will do you the courtesy of honesty in return. You are in more danger than you have the years to understand. The men who made this coin have spent 11 years and a fortune, and they will spend your life without a second thought if they learn what you have learned, and they are the sort who learn things. From this night you do not go near that door. You do not watch. You do not follow. You go home and you keep your book somewhere none can find it, and you wait and you trust that the count you have done has passed into hands that can act on it. You understand me?" "That's what Mrs. Fig said," Harry said. "Stay small, stay out of the way, let the ones whose job it is do the minding." "Then Mrs. Fig, whoever she is wiser than you deserve. She's got a cat that isn't a cat, and she burns her letters, and she works for somebody who watches me." Harry watched the goblin closely as he said it, alert as he always was for the tomato red in Uncle Vernon to see what landed. "The same somebody, I think, that has a man in the ministry called Gru put the little folks' letters in a drawer so nobody reads them." The goblin went absolutely still. It was a different stillness from before. Before, it had been the stillness of a creature deciding whether to strike. This was the stillness of a creature that has just seen, in the dark, the outline of a thing far larger than the thing it came hunting. "Say that again," Bardock said softly. "The part about the letters. Say it exactly as you heard it." Harry said it exactly as he had heard it, in the grey man's dry-turning paper voice, because he had a good ear and a better memory, and he had turned the words over so many times in the dark that they had worn smooth. "Gru has spent 11 years making certain that when the little folk write their complaints, the complaints go into a drawer and the drawer goes into a cupboard and the cupboard is never opened. There was an inspector once who might have made trouble. There is no inspector now." The silence after that was very long, and in it the goblin seemed to grow, not in size, but in some other measure, in gravity and age, and when it spoke its voice had gone quiet and terrible. "For 9 years, Bardock said, my people have laid complaints before the Ministry of Magic, small ones at first, a discrepancy, a vault count that would not settle, a curse breaker who asked questions he had no business asking and then was moved to other work. 9 years of complaints, laid in good faith before the wizards who signed a treaty to hear them, In 9 years, those complaints have come back to us stamped and smiling and empty. No fault found, no action needed, the matter closed. We thought it was the wizard's usual contempt that they did not trouble to read what a goblin writes. His hands had closed slowly into fists, and the long, clever fingers made a sound like dry sticks. You are telling me it was not contempt. You are telling me there was a hand inside their ministry all these years, making certain we were never heard so that this night could come. You are telling me, child, that we were robbed of our warning before we were ever robbed of our gold. Harry did not say anything. It did not seem the kind of thing you said anything to. I need to sit down, Bardock said, which was not at all what Harry had expected, and then the goblin did not sit down, because goblins, Harry would learn, did not sit down in front of anyone, least of all the enemy or the young. It stood very straight, and it looked at the door of number 6 for a while, and then it looked back at Harry. Come away from here, it said, now. We have both been standing too long in a place we should not be, and I have kept the first rule of my trade, which is that you learn nothing worth knowing standing in the open where the subject can see you. There is a place 3 streets over, a garden with a broken wall, where a goblin and a foolish child may talk without being a picture in anyone's window. Walk, do not run. You taught me that yourself an hour ago, though you did not know you were teaching. They went, the goblin and the boy, through the dark from pool to pool of orange light and the black between, and Harry's mind was so full it hummed. And only slowly did he understand that Bardock had, without a word about it, begun to walk on the outside between Harry and the road, the way a grown-up walks who has decided, against all sense and custom, to mind the small thing at his side. The broken-walled garden belonged to a house with boards in its windows, and they stood in the weeds behind the fallen bricks, and their Bardock asked him everything, and Harry told it all of it in order, and the goblin listened the way no grown-up had ever listened to Harry in his life, without once telling him he was making it up. Harry described the grey man whom Bardock named at the second detail, the bare wrist and the counting walk. Vane, Bardock said, and the name landed like a stone in a well. Silas Vane, a curse-breaker of ours once before he was turned out for selling what he learned in our tunnels. We hanged 3 men for less in the old days. He knows our locks from the inside. That is very bad. Harry described Crane, and the goblin's mouth went flat. He described Voss and her bare hand on the door and the white light and the pepper smell, and Bardock closed his eyes for a moment. A forger who can sign our gold, he said. There are perhaps 4 alive who could learn it. Now there are 3, and one has sold herself to Vane. And Harry told him about the church clock, the whole of it, that the men set their business to the church bells, and that the church bells were 4 minutes fast, and that only Harry knew it, and at that the goblin looked at him for a long moment with something in its face that was not quite a bow but was on the road to one. You kept that, Bardock said. A 4-minute error in a clock in a town of no importance, and you kept it because it was true and because it was yours. Do you know, child, that is precisely how a goblin thinks. We keep every true thing, small as it may be, because the world turns on small true things, and the wizards throw them away because they are vain and believe the world turns on them. He shook his head slowly. I have spent my life being told that humans cannot count. And here is one who counts a lying clock in the dark for no reward, and hands me the only weapon I did not know I needed. Is it a weapon? Harry asked. The clock. Everything true is a weapon in the right hand and at the right hour. I do not yet know the shape of this one, but I have learned to keep the true things and let their use find me, and so now have you. Bardock reached to his belt and did something Harry could not see, and then he held out his closed hand and opened it, and on the dry, long palm lay a coin. It was gold, and it was small, and it was real. Harry knew it was real before he touched it, because it threw its little shadow honestly across the goblin's palm even in the thin light, a true dark coin-shaped shadow, the first honest gold he had ever seen. On one side was a face, and on the other a set of scales, and around the edge the letters he could not read, and it was worn smooth at the rim with age and handling. Take it, Bardock said. Harry did not take it. You said a gift is a debt wearing a ribbon. The goblin's teeth showed again the shape of a smile that was not one. So it is, and I do not give gifts, so this is not one, it is a token. It is worth 1 galleon, which to you is a great fortune, and to Gringotts is nothing at all, and I give it to you for 2 reasons, and I will tell you both plainly. He set the coin in Harry's hand and closed the small fingers over it with his own long ones. The first reason is that you have never in your life held a true thing that was given to you and not taken from you, and every accountant knows that a ledger with nothing on the credit side is a ledger that ends in ruin, and I will not have it said that a child did the work of the bank and went home with nothing at all on his own side of the ledger. That is the softer reason, and it is beneath a goblin, and we will not speak of it again. The second reason is the real one. That coin is goblin-struck, and it knows the hand of the one who holds it, and while you hold it or keep it near, there is a thread, thin as a spider's line, between that coin and the deep places of Gringotts, and if you are ever in danger so great that you have no other card to play, you may close your hand on that coin and speak my name, Bardock, 3 times, and it will be heard. I do not promise you rescue. I promise you only that you will be heard, which is more than my people have had from yours in 9 years, and which is, therefore, the most precious thing I own to give." Harry closed his hand around the coin, and it was warm, warmer than metal should be, and it did not want to turn over to be admired because it had nothing to hide, and he put it not in his shoe but in the inside of his cheek, tucked against his gum, where the Dursleys would never look and never find it, and the goblin watched him do it, and gave a short, rough sound that might, in a goblin, have been approval. The goblin was quiet a moment, ordering something behind its eyes, and when it spoke again it had the sound of a creature thinking aloud in front of another, which it had not done in a long while, and which is a kind of trust, though Bardock would have bitten off his tongue before he called it that. "You believe, because you have handed me the pattern, that the thing is as good as stopped," Bardock said. "It is not. What you have given me is a coin, a clock, and the word of a human child, and I will tell you plainly what each is worth in the halls where I must carry them. The coin is worth everything. It is proof, it has weight, it can be laid on a table, and it does not lie. The clock is worth much if I can find the lock it fits, and the word of a human child is worth, in a goblin reckoning, precisely nothing, because you are not of the nation. You owe us no oath and we owe you none, and a claim with no oath beneath it is a claim built on sand. My people do not take the word of wizards. We have 3,000 years of reasons not to, and every one of them is written in goblin blood. Then how do you? By making it worth something. That is my difficulty, not yours, and I will solve it, or I will not." The bird's bright eyes glittered. "Understand where I must go with this. I cannot carry it to the wizard's ministry. You have shown me tonight that the ministry has a rotten board in its floor, and I do not know how far the rot has run, and a goblin who steps onto a rotten floor with gold in his arms is a goblin asking to fall through it. So I must carry it home, to the bank, and below the bank to the deep halls where my people keep their own law, which is older than the treaty, older than your ministry, older than the English on your tongue. I must stand before the ledger court of the nation and say, a wizard means to break the deepest vaults on the night of the reckoning, and I know it because a wizard's castaway of 6 years counted it on his fingers in a muggle street. And they will laugh at me, or do worse than laugh, because a goblin who cannot prove his claim has staked his standing on air, and my standing is the whole of what I own." He set one long finger against the false coin in Harry's palm. "This buys me a hearing, barely. The rest I must win in the court of my own kind, and it will be the hardest audit of my life, and I did not choose it. A child in a dark street chose it for me. So hear the true shape of what you have done. You wanted someone who could stop them to know what you know. Now one does. And the price of it, the price you swore you did not wish to pay, is that the someone is a single goblin, standing alone against the doubt of his whole nation with a child's counting in his fist. That is what your warning costs, Harry Potter. I do not tell you to weigh you down. I tell you because you dealt in true things all night, and the truest thing I hold is that this is very far from over, and that before the 9th, one way or the other, the nation will have to decide whether the word of a boy is worth the weight of its oldest law. Now go home," Bardock said, "and Harry Potter, understand what you have done tonight. You have handed the bank a warning it did not have, and you have handed me a suspicion I did not want, that the rot goes up into the highest chambers of the wizard's own house, and both of those are debts, whatever you say about wanting nothing, and Gringotts pays its debts. It is the only thing we have never failed to do. Go home and be a child and let the grown things move now, and if I have judged the world rightly, you will hear from us before the 9th. Harry went home. He walked from dark to dark, and he did not run, and behind him the goblin stood among the broken bricks and watched him the length of the road before it was, between one street lamp's flicker and the next, simply not there. He almost made it clean. He was over the side gate and across the silver garden and reaching for the back door key on its foolish hook when the kitchen light came on, and Mrs. Figg was standing in the doorway of number 4's kitchen in a mackintosh over her nightdress, with the gray Tom that was not a cat sitting at her slippered feet, and her watery eyes were not watery at all. "Harry Potter," she said, very low so as not to wake the house, and there was no mildness in it now, none. "Where in the name of everything watching over you have you been?" Harry stood in the cold garden with a goblin coin against his gum and his mind going like a fist on a door, and he understood that he had walked out of one danger straight into another, because Mrs. Figg was frightened. He could see it in the tremor of the hand that held the door, and a cornered grown-up who has a job to do is the most dangerous kind, and Mrs. Figg's job was to keep him small and safe and out of the way, and here he was, not small, not safe, and very far indeed out of the way. He said nothing because there was nothing to say that would make it smaller, and because he had learned that silence in front of a certain kind of adult was the only ground you did not lose. "You've been to those garages." It was not a question. She had come across the room in CH1 faster than an old woman should, and now she came across the garden the same way, and she took him by the shoulders, not hard, but her bird-light fingers had a wire in them he had never felt before. "After I told you. After I as good as begged you. Have you any idea, child, any idea at all, what walks these streets at night, what would be done to me, to all of us, if you were taken while you were in my keeping? Do you know how long I have stood at that window, how many years, so that nothing would ever come near you, and you climb out in the dark and hand yourself to it?" Her voice cracked and steadied. "What did you see?" Tell me exactly what you saw, and God help me, I am going to have to send word, because this is past me now. This was always past me, and there are those who must be told. There it was, those who must be told. Harry looked up at the old woman who had watched over him his whole life without his ever knowing it, and he made the fastest and most important calculation of his 6 years. And he came down in the end on the side of the truth, because the goblin had told him the truth all night, and it had cost the goblin something to do it. And Harry found that he wanted, for once, to be the kind of person the goblin had turned out to be. "If you send word," Harry said quietly, holding her wide, unquiet eyes with his own, "to the somebody who has you watch me, then think about one thing first. There's a man in the ministry called Gru who has spent 11 years making sure the goblin's letters go in a drawer and nobody reads them. 11 years, and somebody above Gru let him. So before you send your word up the same ladder those letters went up, Mrs. Fig, you'd better be very sure whose hand it lands in at the top. Because I don't know whose side the top is on, and neither, I think, do you." Mrs. Fig's hands went slack on his shoulders. In the kitchen light her old face had gone the color of the false coin, and the gray tom at her feet turned its head and looked up at her, and something passed between the woman and the knot-cat that Harry could not read, and for a long moment the only sound was the drip of the tap she had not quite turned off in the church clock, 3 streets away, striking the half-hour, 4 minutes early, into the dark. Then Mrs. Fig let go of his shoulders and stepped back and looked at him, truly looked, the mild vague grandmother gone clean out of her face, and what was left was tired and clever and old, and she spoke in a different voice, low and plain. "You've grown up crooked and quick in that cupboard, haven't you? Nobody meant you to, nobody was watching the right thing." She pulled the mackintosh tighter and her hands would not quite settle. "You want to know what I am? I'll tell you, because you've earned a true answer, and I have no false one left in me tonight. I'm a squib, Harry, born to magic folk with none of it in me, which is a joke the world plays on a few of us, and it means I can see their world and never once live in it, and it means I make a useful pair of ordinary eyes for a great man who wanted someone ordinary to keep watch over a boy he had hidden in an ordinary place. That great man is the reason you are alive and the reason you are in that cupboard, both at the same time, and I have spent the whole of your life doing as he asked, and never once asking myself whether it was right, because he is held to be the wisest wizard living, and who was I to ask?" Her mouth worked. "And now a child of 6 climbs home at midnight and tells me there is a hand inside the ministry burying the goblin's letters, and asks me whose side the top of the ladder stands on, and I find I have no answer, and I have not been unable to answer a question about that man in 15 years. She stood a while in the cold with the tap dripping behind her, and Harry watched her decide, the same as he had watched her decide to pretend at the tea, except that this time there was no pretending left. "Go to bed," she said at last. "Bolt yourself back in and be small and be quiet, and let no living soul see one thing changed in you. I am not going to send word up the ladder tonight, perhaps not at all. If you are right, then a letter from me climbs the very stairs those goblin letters climbed, and I will not be the hand that passes you to whatever waits at the top. And if you are wrong, then I am an old fool who held a secret one night too long, and I have been a fool before now and lived." She stood aside from the door for him, which she had never done, always going first. "But you hear me, Harry Potter. Whatever you have set moving, whatever came to you in the dark and gave you the nerve you carried home, it is bigger than you and it is bigger than me, and there is a night coming. I feel it the way I feel rain in a joint. When it comes you will want grown things at your back. See that you have chosen them well." Harry went in past her and up the hall and into his cupboard, and reached the wire through the gap and shot the bolt home behind himself, locking himself in, which no one had made him do, because a boy who can lock himself in is a boy who cannot be caught having got out. He lay in the dark with the true goblin coin warm against his gum and Mrs. Fig's tired, clever, unquiet face behind his eyes, and Bardoc's promise turning over and over, "You will hear from us before the 9th. He did not know how many days that left. He did not know what a ledger court was, or how a lone goblin fought the doubt of a whole nation, or why a squib and an auditor had both, in one night, bent their own hard rules for a boy who owned nothing but a book of arrows and suns. He knew only that he had gone out into the dark to learn whose side the watcher was on, and had come home having found something better and far worse, that there were sides, real ones, with a real edge between them, and that he was standing on that edge, small and 6 years old, and that the count he had begun all those weeks ago was no longer only his to finish. In the morning the coin was still there against his gum, and the promise was still there behind his eyes, and both had survived the night, which was how Harry knew they were real. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4, the ledger court. For 4 days nothing came, and Harry learned that waiting for a promise is harder than waiting for a threat, because a threat at least tells you what to watch for. He did as he had been told. He was small and quiet and dull. He did his jobs and ate what he was given, and let Dudley's gang chase him a street or two, so that everything about him looked exactly as it had all summer, an ordinary unwanted boy in an ordinary hot July. He did not go near Wisteria Walk. He did not lift the 3rd paving slab, though his fingers wanted to, because a hiding place you visit is a hiding place you show. He kept the false coin in his shoe and the true coin against his gum, and at night he lay in the cupboard and counted the days he thought were left, and the number was small and getting smaller, and he did not know it exactly, because he did not know when the ninth was, only that it was coming, and that the men were finishing. On the fourth night the true coin grew warm. He felt it wake against his gum while the house was going through its last noises, a warmth that was not the warmth of his own mouth, a live warmth, and under the warmth a faint slow throb once and again, like something very far away knocking to be let in. Harry lay still and let it knock. Then he worked the bolt with his wire, a hair and a hair and a hair, and went out through the silver kitchen and over the squeaking gate, and Bardock was standing in the black mouth of the side passage between number 4 and number 6 as though he had grown there out of the dark, and he did not say hello because goblins did not, and neither did Harry because he had learned. "You will do exactly as I say tonight," Bardock said low. "You will keep your hand on my sleeve and your eyes down and your mouth shut until you are spoken to, and when you are spoken to you will answer plainly and you will not lie, not even a small lie to be liked, because there is nowhere on this earth a lie is more quickly smelt than where I am taking you. Say that you understand." "I understand." "Then understand this also, so that it does not undo you when it comes. I have won you a hearing. It cost me more than I will tell you, and it is not a welcome. You are the first human child to be brought below the counting floor of Gringotts in 900 years, and there are those on the council who would rather cut the thread that brought you than pull on it, and you will feel that in the room and you will not flinch from it, because a thing that flinches is a thing with something to hide. You have nothing to hide, remember that. It is your only armor, and it is better armor than mine." He turned. "Now take my sleeve, and whatever you see on the road, keep walking. The underroad does not like a stopped foot." Harry took a fold of the rough dark cloth in his fist, and Bardock led him not out to the street but back, to the blank brick wall at the dead end of the passage, the wall Harry had leaned against 100 times that summer, and the goblin laid his long hand flat on the brick and spoke 3 words in a language that was all edges, and the wall was not a wall. It did not open like a door. It simply admitted that it had never truly been a wall, the way a word you have said wrong all your life turns out to have been another word, and where the brick had been there was a low arch of old stone going down, and a smell came up out of it of cold water and iron and the green pepper smell, but older, much older, the smell at the bottom of the world. Harry kept his hand on the sleeve and his foot moving and went down into it, and behind them the arch closed and was brick again, and there was no more little winging, and there had, the dark seemed to say, never been any such place at all. The underroad was a stair and then a slope and then a long level way, and it was lit by nothing Harry could find, a dim red glow that came off the stone itself, as if the rock remembered being fire. The walls were close, and then they were not. Twice the passage opened without warning into a black space so large that Bardock's footsteps and Harry's went out into it and did not come back, and Harry could not see the far side or the roof, only feel the size of it pressing on his ears, and once across one of these spaces something enormous turned over in water he could not see, a slow heavy displacement and a sigh, and Bardock's hand closed hard on Harry's shoulder and moved him on and said nothing, and Harry kept walking. Because the underroad did not like a stopped foot, and neither, plainly, did whatever slept in the dark lake. The road crossed the great water on a bridge of stone no wider than a cart, with no rail and no rope, and Bardock went out onto it without slowing, and Harry went behind him with his hand knotted in the sleeve and his eyes fixed on the goblin's heels, because down was a thing he could feel on both sides and did not need to see. Halfway across, the red glow failed altogether, and there was only the sound of the huge slow water, and then far off in the black, a light, a single pale eye low to the surface, filmed and vast and the size of a window, that opened and considered the 2 specks on the bridge and closed again, incurious. Harry felt Bardock's step check for the smallest part of a moment and go on. "A dragon," the goblin said, when the bridge was behind them and the walls had drawn close again. "Blind now and older than your England, chained to the deepest gate by links no spell of yours or mine could part. We do not keep it for the gold. We keep it because there are 3 or 4 things in the lowest vaults that a dragon is the only fit jailer for, and because a thief who has passed all else must still pass a thing that has never in 1,000 years been reasoned with. Remember the eye on the water. When men speak of robbing Gringotts as a clever trick, that is the thing they have never seen. Vane has seen it. Whatever else that grey devil is, he is no fool, and no fool would try this, which is how I know that what he carries is not cleverness but a key handed to him that turns every lock we trusted, one after another, from the eye on the water to the door at the very top. That is the cold at the back of it, not that a thief is coming, but that a thief is coming who has been given the run of our own house. They pass doors. Not the doors of houses, iron doors, round and vast, set into the living rock, each with no keyhole and no handle, only a surface worked all over with fine goblin signing that seemed to move when Harry was not looking straight at it. Behind some of them he heard sounds. Behind one coins, a whole slow river of coins, sliding and settling, the sound of more money than there was in all the world Harry knew. Behind another, nothing, and nothing so complete it had a weight. and once set apart at the end of a side gallery down which the red light did not reach, a door taller than the rest and blacker, and from behind it came no sound at all, but the true coin against Harry's gum went cold as it passed, cold and still, the way the false coin was cold, and Harry understood without being told that whatever was kept there was old and hungry and best not thought about, and he did not think about it, and he kept walking. "The deep vaults," Bardock said very quietly, not slowing. "You are walking under 1,000 years of the world's keeping, king's ransoms, cursed things wizards paid us to hold so they need not hold them. Relics your ministry pretends do not exist, all of it kept, all of it counted, none of it ever taken, because we do not lose what is given to us to keep. That is not a boast, child, it is the single fact on which everything my people are is built. A goblin who loses what he keeps is not a goblin anymore, he is nothing. Do you see now why a thief in the deep vaults is not to us a matter of gold? It's not the gold," Harry said, "it's that if someone takes it you stop being what you are." Bardock looked down at him without stopping. "Yes," he said, "that is exactly it. I did not think a human could hold that in his head. Keep holding it, you will need it in the room." Once more before the counting floor the road passed beneath falling water, a thin cold sheet of it coming down out of the dark across the whole width of the way, and Bardock stopped Harry with a hand and made him wait while a train of laden carts went through ahead. Where the water touched the carts a light went out of certain things upon them, a glamour stripped, a false face washed off, so that a chest that had looked like plain grey iron showed for one instant the gold beneath. "The downfall," Bardock said. "It unmakes a lie, every keeper, every cart, every visitor passes under it, and whatever is not what it claims to be is shown for what it is. Walk through with me. You have nothing false about you but the coin in your shoe, and the coin is meant to be false, so it will come out only wet." They walked through the cold fall of it, and it took Harry's breath with its chill and gave it back, and on the far side he was a wet boy again, and understood that he had come to the one country in the world where even a lie was made to show its face, and where being exactly what you were was not a weakness but the only safe thing there was to be. The counting floor of Gringotts, when they came up onto it, took the words out of Harry's mouth and did not give them back for a while. It was a hall so high that its roof was weather. There were slow clouds up there in the dark, and a light that was not day and not lamp but the shine of gold itself, 10,000 veins of it running through the black stone walls and floor and up the pillars, which were not pillars but the roots of the mountain worked into shape, and everywhere, on tiers and galleries running up and up out of sight, goblins worked. They worked at long stone counters with brass scales and towers of ledgers, weighing, marking, sliding beads on frames that clattered like rain, and none of them hurried and none of them rested, and the sound of all their counting together was a low sea sound that filled the enormous dark, and Harry, 6 years old and small for 6, stood at the edge of it holding a goblin's sleeve and felt the whole weight of a thing he had no name for come down on him, and instead of crushing him, lift him. So that he stood up straighter under it rather than smaller. It was the nearest to wonder he had come in his whole life, and it did not hurt, which every large feeling before it had. He held it and he kept his eyes down as he had been told, but he took the haul in through the corners of them, all of it, because he was Harry, and a thing seen was still a thing kept. A goblin child ran past them along the edge of the floor, the first Harry had seen, no bigger than a cat, carrying a ledger nearly its own size, and it stopped dead when it saw Harry and stared at him with its bird-bright eyes gone round, because a human on the counting floor was as strange to it as a goblin in a fairy tale had once been to Harry, and then an older goblin cuffed it gently onward, and it went, looking back the whole way. Harry understood, watching it go, that this was not only a bank and a fortress and a hall of law, it was a country. Goblins were born here and grew here and died here and were counted, cradle to grave, in the great ledgers running up into the weather, and it had gone on so, unseen beneath the feet of wizards who thought Gringotts a shop with tellers, longer than there had been a crown in England. He had walked past the front door of that world his whole imagined life, and never once guessed there was a nation behind it. Nobody had. That he thought was the largest of all the things the summer had taught him, larger than the false gold, larger than the plot, that a whole proud old world lay folded up inside his own, keeping its own accounts, and that it had been robbed of its warning by people too certain of themselves to look, and that he, who had never in his life been certain of anything, had looked and had seen. They did not stop on the counting floor. Bardock led him along its edge under the galleries to a low wide door of black iron with a single scale worked upon it, and through it into a smaller and far older room, and here the gold in the walls ran thin and the light was redder and the air had the weight of law in it. It was a round room, and around its wall ran a stone bench high above the floor, so that whoever sat on it looked down, and on the bench sat the council of the Goblin nation. There were 9 of them. Harry did not count them by choosing to, he counted them as he breathed. 9 goblins, old past guessing, robed in dark stuff sewn with fine bright wire, and in the center and highest of them one so old that his skin had gone the gray of the stone behind him and his eyes had filmed to the color of the deep water, and when this one moved his head the whole room went quiet, counters and all, and Harry knew before Bardock's grip told him that here was the oldest creditor in the world. Ragnak Bardock breathed, High Council of the nation, say nothing to him unless he asks it of you. And the one on his left hand, the one whose mouth is already open to bite, that is Grindanuk, who keeps the treaty ledger and who has staked his standing against mine that you are a wizard's trick. He will try to break you, let him try. You will stand at the stone in the middle where the light falls, and you will not lean on it because it is not yours to lean on. Bardock took Harry to the middle of the floor, to a waist-high block of black stone worn smooth on top by a great many hands, and set Harry's hand from his sleeve onto the cold of it. And then Bardock stepped back and down and away, and Harry was alone in the fall of red light with 9 of the oldest beings on earth looking down at him, and he did the only thing he knew how to do when a bigger creature had him fixed and weighed. He went still, and he kept his face empty, and he waited to be spoken to. The one called Grindanuk spoke first and did not wait for leave, and his voice was dry and quick and cut like the thin blade Bardock had held to Harry's throat. So this is the auditor's marvel, Grindanuk said to the council, not to Harry, a human, a child. Brought under our floor, past our vaults, shown our deep road, in breach of every custom that has kept us safe since the 6th rebellion, on the word of one auditor who has staked his good name on a wizard's whelp with a stolen coin in his shoe. I say what half this council is thinking and is too courteous to say. This is a trap. This is Vane's own next move. You seek the leak inside our house, Bardock, and here you have carried it in yourself, small and wide-eyed, and set it down among us and called it a witness. He turned his filmed eyes on Harry at last, and they were not kind. Speak, child, tell us your master's name. Tell us who taught you the words you are going to say, and we will be gentler with you than we will be with him. Harry looked up at Grindanuk, and he thought about it, because he had learned that thinking in front of a goblin was not weakness but courtesy, and then he said plainly in the flat, clear voice he kept for the dangerous, Nobody taught me. That's the whole reason I'm any use to you. The room went very still. Somewhere up in the weather of the roof, a slow cloud moved. Explain that, said Ragnak. It was the first he had spoken, and his voice was slow and enormous and quiet, a landslide heard from a long way off, and the whole council bent toward it. If somebody taught me, Harry said, keeping his eyes on the old gray one now because that was where the weight was, then you'd be right not to believe me, because then I'd only be saying what they wanted said, but nobody sent me. Nobody knows I'm any good at watching because I've spent my whole life making sure nobody knows anything about me at all because it's safer. I found the garages by accident. I watched the men because there was nothing else to watch. I didn't know it was your bank. I didn't know there was your bank. I'm not any use to Vane because I don't want anything and I don't know anything he'd want, and I'm not any use to a trick because a trick needs the person to believe a lie, and I haven't got a lie. I've only got what I counted. You can check every bit of it. That's the thing about counting. It checks. A child does not speak so, Grindanuk said, but he said it more slowly than before. This one does, said Bardock from the shadow at the wall, and was silent again at once because he had not been asked. Ragnak raised one gray hand, a small movement that stopped the room. The treaty keeper is right to be careful, he said. Care is the mother of our long life. But care that will not weigh a thing lest it find something unwelcome is not care. It is cowardice wearing care's coat, and I have sat on this bench 400 years to keep the two apart. We will weigh the child, auditor, the coin. Bardock came forward and laid the false galleon on the smooth black stone before Harry, and one of the 9 came down from the bench, a goblin whose fingers were stained and burned, a smith or an Aesir, and took up the coin and did to it in front of the council the things Bardock had done in the dark and a great many more. He weighed it against a true coin, and the pans hung level. He held it to a flame that burned green, and the coin drank the flame and did not char. He passed it under running water poured from a stone ewer, and the water broke around it and left it dry. He laid it in a fall of the red light, and where the true coin cast its honest shadow, the false one cast a paleness, a coin-shaped lie, and at that the Aesir made a sound low in his throat and did not finish his test, and turned to the council with the false coin held out on his burned palm like something dead. It is signed, the Aesir said. Signed in our own hand in the deep manner, the manner we do not teach and have not taught in 400 years. Whoever made this learned our signing at its root. There are 3 living who could. One is dead this month past, we're told, drowned, no fault found. That leaves 2, and one of the 2 has not been seen since the spring. He looked at Harry, and something in his burned old face had changed. The child's coin is true. The false coin is truer still, in the worst way. It is exactly what he says it is. I will stake my forge on it. A murmur went along the bench, and Grindanuk's mouth was a thin line, and Ragnak's filmed eyes had not once left Harry. Grindanuk tried a different road. You say there are 3 of them. How do you know there are not 4? A watcher sees what passes the window. He does not see who waits in the next room. I don't know there aren't 4, Harry said at once. I only ever saw 3. There might be 10 I never saw. I'm telling you the 3 I counted, not the number there are. Those are different, and I won't pretend they're the same to make you happier, because if I did and there was a 4th, you'd trust my 3 less when it mattered most. Grindanuk sat with that a moment. And the man in the ministry, this grew, you never saw him. You have his name from a voice through a wall. He may be a fiction. Vane may have said the name to the wall on purpose, knowing a listener might carry it, to set you and us chasing a shadow while the true hand works on unnamed. It was a good trap, and Harry felt the shape of it close, and he did not flinch, because he had been trapped by clever voices than this over smaller things, and he had learned that the way out of a trap is never to fight the door but to find the thing the trap forgot. He might be a fiction, Harry agreed, but Vane didn't say the name to the wall. He said it to Crane, quiet and cross, like a man does when the other one keeps asking about a thing that's already settled. You don't get cross laying a false trail. You get cross when it's real and you're tired of talking about it. And he said Gru holds because Gru has more to lose than we do, and that isn't a thing you say about a made-up man. You don't measure what a shadow has to lose. He looked up at the bench. I could be wrong, but you asked how I know, and that's how, not that I'm sure. That the crossness was real, and you can't fake being tired of a lie. Ragnock made a sound then, low, that was not quite a laugh and had never in 400 years been anything so warm, and even Grindenuk's thin mouth moved. He weighs a man's temper as we weigh gold, the treaty keeper said, half to himself, and reads the true coin under the false one. Where does a wizard's castaway learn to do that? And Harry, because it was true, and because he had promised not to lie, even a small lie to be liked, said, from my uncle, you learn to read a man's temper very fast when getting it wrong means going without supper. Nobody on the bench said anything to that, but something in the room shifted, and it was not against him. The coin proves a forgery, Grindenuk said, recovering. It proves someone means us harm. It does not prove the child knows the hour or the manner, and it is the hour and the manner we must have, or all this is a fright and no defense. Anyone may bring us a bad coin and a tall tale. Give us the manner, child, if you have it. Give us the hour, and know that I will hunt the smallest error in it as a stoat hunts a rabbit, and one error and I will have you and your auditor both put out onto the road above with the memory of this floor scrubbed from your heads, and Vane may do with you as he likes. So Harry told them the manner and the hour, all of it in order as he had carried it, and it was the hardest and the best hour of his life, because for the first time there were minds in front of him quick enough and cold enough to catch everything he threw, and they threw it back sharpened. He told them the three, Vane and Crane and Voss, and the Aesir nodded at Voss's name and looked ill. He told them the cases that went in light and came out heavy, and the smith on the bench said that was the finished coin going out to be seeded into circulation, a little at a time, so no sudden flood would ring the tally, and Harry said yes, that was what he'd thought, and Grindenuk looked at him hard for having thought it. He told them the words through the wall, grew upstairs and the letters in the drawer, and the whole bench went stiff and cold and turned to one another, and Ragnar's grey hand closed slowly on the arm of the stone bench, and that Harry saw landed harder than anything, harder than the coin. He told them the ninth and the reckoning and the deep locks that opened themselves for one night to the writ alone and 3 bells, and after the 3rd bell the new wards coming up and anyone inside being inside for good. At the word reckoning the room had gone so quiet that Harry heard the gold humming in the walls. He should not know that word, Grindenuk said, and now there was something under the dryness that had not been there, and it was not triumph. The reckoning is not spoken of above the counting floor. It is not written where a wizard may read it. How does the child have the word? Vane had it, Harry said. He said it to Crane. He said on the night of the reckoning they opened themselves. He said once in 10 years they take the old wards down to lay the new, and for one night the deep vaults answer to the writ and the writ alone. Harry paused and did the thing he did, laid 2 facts side by side to see if they were one fact in 2 coats, and heard himself say the thing he had not planned to say, which means somebody told him. You said a wizard can't read it and it isn't spoken above the floor, so Vane didn't find the reckoning by being clever. Somebody down here or somebody who was down here once gave it to him, the same way somebody gave him your signing. It's not just that he's coming, it's that he's been let in already, a piece at a time for years, by someone on your side of the door. The silence after that was the loudest thing Harry had ever heard. Grindenuk sat back slowly on the high bench, and the dryness had gone out of him, and what was left was old and unsteadied, and it was the first time all night Harry had seen a goblin look as grown men look when the ceiling of the thing they trusted shows a crack. It was Grindenuk who broke it in the end, and it was worse than any breaking Harry had seen, because it was a hard old thing breaking. The treaty keeper laid his stained hand flat on the great ledger before him, the book he had kept his whole life, and he spoke not to Harry now but to the bench and to himself, and to 9 years he could not call back. I kept the complaints, Grindenuk said. It was my office. Every discrepancy, every count that would not settle, every curse-breaker who asked a question and was moved to other work. I wrote them fair and I sealed them and I sent them up to the wizard's ministry as the treaty binds us to be heard. 9 years. In 9 years they came back to me stamped and courteous and empty. No fault found, no cause for concern. The goblins are, the 3rd year's reply said, and I have it by heart, a proud folk, quick to cry wolf, and the ministry is confident that continued good relations are best served by not indulging every alarm, not indulging. His voice did not rise, it went lower and worse. And do you know whose counsel sat behind those words? Not the minister. Ministers come and go and sign what they are told is wise. Behind those replies, year upon year, in the quiet way great men work, stood the council of the one wizard your whole world calls wise, the chief warlock, Dumbledore. The name went round the bench like cold water down a wall. He did not steal from us, Grindenuk said. Let it be said plainly, for I will not have even him lied about in this room. He took no coin and made no forgery, and I do not think to this hour that he knew a robbery was being built inside the silence he made. But he made the silence. He is the great keeper of the peace, and he has long held that the goblins are proud and easily alarmed, and that the surest way to keep the long peace is to soothe us and not to heed us. And so, year on year, when our warnings climbed the stairs, it was his gentle hand that turned them aside, not from malice, from a certainty that he knew our own house better than we did. And a man who is certain he knows your house better than you do is worth 10 thieves to a thief, for the thief must break the lock, and the wise man need only persuade the world there was never anything behind the door worth locking. He lifted his filmed eyes to Harry, and the dryness was gone from them altogether. That is the second hand the child read in 1 hour, sitting on our floor, which I did not read in 9 years of keeping the book. The wizards did not fail to hear us because a traitor stopped their ears. They failed to hear us because their wisest man taught them we were not worth the hearing, and a thief found that open door and walked in. Ragnarok, alone of the 9, did not change. He looked down at Harry from 400 years of keeping accounts, and when he spoke the landslide in his voice had come nearer. The child has done in 1 hour, Ragnarok said, what this council has failed to do in 9 years. He has read the shape of the whole. There is a forgery, yes. There is a robbery coming, yes. But under the robbery there is a betrayal, and under the betrayal there is a second betrayal in the house of the wizards that kept our warnings from being heard while the first was prepared. 2 hands, and both of them let in through doors that should have been shut, and the whole of it aimed at one night that comes. He turned his grey head to the treaty keeper. In how many days, Grindenuk? Say it aloud so the child understands what he has walked into. Grindenuk's voice was low. 6 days. The reckoning falls on the 9th. It is 6 days away. 6 days, Ragnarok said, and let it lie in the room. Then the high council of the goblin nation leaned forward on his stone bench, and the gold in the walls threw its light up into the ruin of his ancient face, and he spoke to Harry directly for the first time, and every goblin in the room went still to hear it. You came to us wanting nothing, Ragnarok said. The auditor told us, and I did not believe it, because in 400 years I have not once met a wizard who wanted nothing. And I have watched you for an hour, child, and weighed every word as it left you, which is a thing I do without choosing to, as you count, and I find, against all my long knowing of your kind, that it is true. You want the count to come out wrong for the thieves, and you will take no profit from it. Do you know what that is in our reckoning? It is the beginning of an oath, not the whole of one, the beginning. Wizard offered us the truth once for its own sake, and forwent the gold of it, and we have not forgotten, and we do not forget, and that is a thing to hold with hope and with caution both, because Gringotts remembers its debts longer than empires last. He straightened. We will not raise the alarm. Hear me, all of you, we will not. To cry the thing aloud is to warn the thieves and to shame the wizards into a war of covering, and to lose the one advantage we hold, which is that they do not know we know. We will let them come. We will let them come down onto the deep road on the night of the reckoning, thinking the way is open, and we will be the thing they find at the bottom of it. And the child's counting will be the frame of the trap, because the child alone holds the pieces of it that live above our floor in the wizard's world where our eyes do not reach. Auditor, the boy is yours to keep and to guard until the 9th. Guard him as you would guard a vault, for that is what he is now. He is a vault that holds the only copy of the thing that saves us. Bardock bowed low and did not speak, and Harry stood at the black stone with the red light on him, and understood that the count he had begun in a lock-up garage in June had become, without his ever deciding it, the hinge of something enormous, and that he was 6, and that there was no getting off the hinge now. Far above them, in the ordinary, bright, dangerous world, the thieves were finishing. Silas Vane stood at the window of a rented room in a town whose name did not matter and looked out at nothing, and behind him Cressida Voss laid the last of the plates in a case lined with black velvet, and Crane sat in the one chair with his heavy hands loose on his knees and did not fidget because he never fidgeted, and the 3 of them were quiet in the way of professionals who have said everything worth saying and are only waiting now for the clock. Gru sent word, Vane said. He did not turn from the window. His voice was dry and even, paper turning. There is a goblin off the ledger, an auditor, Bardock. He filed no route, drew no expenses, and has not been seen at his counter in 9 days. Voss did not look up from the velvet. Auditors go quiet when they are onto something. It means nothing on its own. On its own, no. Vane watched the street below, the ordinary people going home to ordinary suppers, none of them aware that the money in their pockets was slowly filling with a lie. But Gru also says the deep counters have been reweighing the summer's intake. Quietly, without an order in the book, someone has smelt the false gold, Cressida, sooner than we planned for, and an auditor who goes off the ledger the same week the counters start reweighing is not a coincidence, it is a thread. And a thread means a needle, and a needle means a hand. He was silent a moment. I dislike a hand I cannot see. Then we move the 9th, Voss said. Bring it forward, strike before they close the gap. We cannot move the 9th. Vane said it without heat, as one states arithmetic. The reckoning is not a date on a calendar we may shift to suit us. It is the one night in 10 years the deep wards come down, and it comes when it comes, and if we are not standing at the writ when the first bell rings, we wait another 10 years, or we do not wait at all. You know this. Your hands have not left that velvet since I said the word auditor, which tells me your blood knows it too. Voss's gloved hands went still, and she folded them, and that was the whole of her answer. Gru is the soft place now, Vane went on. Gru has held 11 years because he had nothing to lose but his good name. Now there is a goblin loose who might put a name to the drawer he filled, and a clerk with a rope in view is a clerk who bargains. If Gru feels the noose, Gru will sell the 3 of us for a longer drop of his own. He considered the dark street, so Gru is to be given no time to feel it, 6 days. We keep him busy and winning and certain, and on the 7th it will not matter what he feels, for it will be finished. But the watcher, the pale eyes came back into the room. The watcher I want before the 9th, not after. A hand that found us once can find us twice, and I will not go down into that dark with an unknown standing in the light at my back. Crane spoke without moving. Then we find it, we find it. Vane turned from the window at last, and his face was calm and gray and entirely without heat, and that was the most dangerous thing about it. Somewhere between our workshop and the bank there is a leak, and a leak is a person, and a person can be found. Gru will trace the auditor from his end. We will trace the trail from ours, back along the road we came, to the last place we grew careless. His pale eyes moved, unhurried, over some map only he could see. The Surrey ground, the garages. I felt a watcher there in the summer and let it go, because a watcher and a muggle nowhere seemed beneath our notice, and beneath notice is exactly where a wise man hides a knife. That was a mistake. I do not make many, and I do not leave them lying. He drew on his gloves, one finger at a time. We will go back to Surrey, and we will find out who was standing in the dark all summer, watching us count. And when we have found them, Crane, there will be no drawer to put them in, and no complaint, and no inspector, and no boy. Only a sum corrected. Below Little Winging, in a stone cell off the counting floor where Bardock had made him a bed of clean straw and a barred door between him and the deep dark, Harry Potter slept with the true coin warm against his gum, and did not yet know that his name had been spoken in the room over the workshop, or that the grey man was coming back to Surrey to find the watcher, or that the 6 days he had been given to help save the oldest bank in the world were the same 6 days in which the oldest bank in the world would have to find a way to save him. He slept the way children sleep, wholly, having done a great and impossible thing and being too young to lie awake congratulating himself on it, and above him on the high stone bench, Ragnar sat alone through the goblin night and looked at the barred door of the cell and thought his slow, enormous thoughts about oaths and beginnings and the price a nation pays and is paid, and did not sleep at all. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. The watcher watched Bardock brought him home before the birds, up through the underroad and out of a wall that had never been a wall, and Harry climbed the squeaking gate and crossed the silver garden and worked the bolt back with his wire and lay down in the cupboard as though he had never left it. And when Aunt Petunia hammered on the door at 7, he was exactly where he was supposed to be, which was the whole art of it. "You will not like this next part," Bardock had told him at the mouth of the passage in the last of the dark. "You will want to stay below where the walls are ours and nothing wingless comes uninvited. You cannot. If the boy who lives in the cupboard is gone 3 days, then the fat man reports it, and the report brings the ordinary police, and the ordinary police bring notice, and notice is the one thing that will tell Vane he has been seen. Your safety and ours is the same safety, and it is this, that nothing about you changes. So you will go back to your cupboard and your jobs and your gang of small brutes, and you will be the nothing you have always made yourself, and you will let no soul see that a nothing has been to the bottom of the world and come back with a coin against its teeth." The bird bright eyes had held him. "We will be near. You will not see us and you must not look for us, because a boy who looks for goblins in the hedges is a boy telling the hedges there are goblins. But we will be near. Keep the coin. Count your days. 5 now till the 9th, and Harry Potter. If the day comes when near is not near enough, you will know it, and you will close your hand on the coin and say my name 3 times, and you will not wait to be sure, because by the time you are sure it will be too late. You understand me?" "I understand." "Then go and be small." So Harry went and was small, and it was the hardest smallness of his life, because now the smallness was a costume worn over a fire. He weeded the border, and he took the bin out, and he let Dudley trip him in the hall, and he said sorry for being tripped. And all the while the count ran in the back of his head, 5 days, and under the count ran the thing Bardock had not needed to say, which was that somewhere out in the ordinary bright morning a grey man was coming to Surrey to find the boy who had watched him, and that the boy who had watched him was weeding a border in plain sight with a false coin in his shoe. The goblins kept their word about being near, and Harry kept his about not looking, and the 2 disciplines rubbed against each other all day like a stone in a shoe. He knew they were there because of the small wrongnesses that had suddenly gone right. The stray dog that had barked at the bottom of the garden every dawn of Harry's life did not bark now, and went quiet and careful past the side passage as dogs go past a thing they have decided to respect. Cat sat on the garden wall at dusk that was not one of Mrs. Fig's and was not, Harry was fairly sure, altogether a cat, and watched the street with the flat sorting patience he had learned to read, and was gone by full dark. Once lifting the dustbin lid, he found on the underside of it, scratched fresh and small, the crossed circle with the tail, the mark from the garage door and the false coin, and he understood it as a soldier understands a sentry's chalk on a wall. We hold this ground, pass on. He rubbed his thumb over it and left it and told no one, and it steadied him more than any words could, because it meant that even here in the ordinary bin and border world where Bardock could not walk by day, the nation had set its sign over the boy in the cupboard. But a sign is not a shield, and Harry knew the difference. The sign meant the ground was watched, not that the ground was safe, and watching had never once stopped a thing from happening. At its best, it only told you the exact shape of the thing as it came. He saw the first sign of them on the second day, and he saw it because he had never once stopped watching, not even now, especially not now. He was sent to the corner shop for Aunt Petunia's magazine, and on the way back, at the top of Magnolia Crescent, there was a van that did not belong. It was a plain white van, a workman's van, parked where the road bent, and it had no name on its side, which was the first wrong thing, because the vans that came to Little Winging always had names on them, the gas and the telephone and the man who did the drives. And a van with no name had no reason to sit for 3 hours at the bend, which it had, because Harry had passed it going, and it was there coming back with the engine cold and no one fixing anything. And in the cab a man sat and did not read a paper and did not eat his lunch and did not do any of the things men in parked vans do. He only watched the road. He watched it with a flat patience Harry knew from the inside, the patience of a person whose whole job that day was to watch a road and see who used it. And Harry did not slow and did not stare and did not do one thing a boy would not do. And he walked past the nameless van with his aunt's magazine under his arm and his eyes on the pavement, and he memorized the man's face without appearing to raise his eyes, because he had been memorizing faces without appearing to raise his eyes since before he could read. It was not Vane and it was not Crane. It was a fourth face, a lookout, hired or sworn, and that told Harry something cold, that the three had become at least four, and that the four had brought their search to the exact streets where Harry lived, which meant they had narrowed it, which meant they were closer than a whole town, closer than a whole street, close enough to sit at the bend and watch the road that Harry walked twice a day. That night the true coin did not warm and Bardock did not come, and Harry understood that too. Bardock had said, "Do not look for us," and a goblin coming to the cupboard 2 nights running was a goblin drawing a line on a map for anyone who could read a map, and Vane could read any map there was. So Harry did not look for him, and he lay in the dark and did his sums, and the sum that came out was that he was, for the moment, on his own in the ordinary world with a lookout at the bend, and that the whole weight of the goblins, watching near as it was, could not come into the daylight to help him without giving away that the goblins were watching at all. He was the bait and the eyes and the weak place, all three, and he was 6, and there was nobody he could say any of it to. He got his book that night. He had promised Bardock he would leave it under the slab, and he broke the promise carefully, because a promise you keep to your own harm is a promise made by a fool, and Harry was not a fool. If they were narrowing, they might narrow to the garages, and if they came to the garages, they might come to the side path in the loose slab, and Harry would rather have his book in his cheek with the coin than have it found under a stone with his code in it, good as the code was. So he lifted the 3rd slab with 2 fingers in the dark and took the bread bag and put the book inside his jumper against his skin, and set the slab down without a sound and went back in, and now he carried the whole of it on his own body, the book and the false coin and the true one, everything he knew and everything that could hang him, all of it warm against him in the dark. On the 3rd day they found the garages, and Harry watched them do it, from the one place left in the world he was sure of, which was nowhere near. He had climbed before dawn to the flat roof of the substation shed, a place no grown man could reach without a ladder and no child but a desperate one would try, and he lay on the warm felt of it with his chin on his hands and a slit of the whole row of garages below him, small and far, and he waited because he had to know, because knowing was the only weapon he had left and he was not going to give it up now. And in the gray light Vane came, and Crane, and the 4th man from the van, and they went to number 6, and they did not open it. They walked the row instead. They walked it slowly, and Crane bent at the fence and read the gap in the boards, the snag of wool that Harry had left there weeks ago and never dared go back for, and he put one heavy finger through the gap and turned it, and Vane came and looked at what Crane had found, and then Vane turned and looked very slowly all the way up the row and along the fences and over the allotments, and for a moment that stopped Harry's breath in his chest up toward the substation and its shed. And Harry pressed himself flat to the felt and did not move and did not breathe, and the gray gaze passed over the roof and found nothing, because there was nothing to find but a boy who had made himself once again into a part of the world. Then Vane went to the open door of number 9 and went inside and was gone a while and came out holding something small in 2 fingers, and even from the roof, even far and small, Harry knew what it was. It was a feather. A pigeon feather from the nest Harry had made of himself behind the dead car, and Vane held it up and turned it in the gray light and said something to Crane that Harry could not hear, and Crane looked back at the fence gap in its snag of wool, low down, a child's height, and Harry saw the 2 of them arrive without a word he could hear, at the same place he had arrived weeks ago about them, that the Watcher was small. That the Watcher had squeezed through a low gap and lain in a low nest and reached up a wire to a high bolt, that the Watcher was a child. Harry lay on the roof and watched the gray man learn that the enemy who had unbuilt his 11 years' work was a little boy, and he watched Vane not be surprised by it, not shrug it off, not soften 1 degree, and that was the coldest thing Harry had yet seen the gray man do, to learn that his hunter was a child and to only visibly from 100 feet begin to plan the child's death with exactly the same care he would have spent on a man's. They did not find him that day. But they had his size now and his habits, and a town small enough to sift, and Harry understood, climbing down from the shed when they had long gone, that he had perhaps a day before size and habit, and a small sifted town brought the gray man to the door of number 4, and that he could not run because a boy who runs is a boy reported, and he could not hide below because a boy gone missing is a boy who tips the whole plot, and he could not fight because he was 6. All he could do was what he had always done, which was watch and count and be ready, and hope that near was near enough when the day came that it had to be. It came the next evening in the last of the light on the short cut home from the shop, and it came the way Bardock said it would, so fast that being sure and being too late were the same instant. Harry knew the cut-through between the back of the shops and Wisteria Walk as he knew his own hand, every bin and every broken bit of fence, and he took it because it was quickest and because Aunt Petunia wanted her bread before the news, and he was halfway along it in the narrow blue dusk between the high brick walls, when the far end of it filled with a shape he knew, wide as a door, standing quite still, waiting, and Harry stopped, and behind him, at the near end, quiet as the dusk itself. The 4th man from the van stepped into the gap and stood, and the cut-through had 2 ends and both of them were shut. Crane came down the alley without hurrying, his heavy hands loose and open, and there was no anger in him and no relish, only work, a professional coming to do a thing he had done before, and he said in a low, even voice that carried in the narrow brick, "You've had a busy summer, haven't you? Come here, boy, no one wants to hurt you." Which was the lie grown men told, the same in the magic world as the ordinary one, the lie that meant the opposite of every word, and Harry did not come and did not run at the shut ends, because running at a shut end is how the rabbit dies, and he did the one thing the cut-through offered that a wide man and a hired man could not, which was to go up. There was a low lean-to roof against the left wall, the corrugated cover over the butcher's bins, and Harry had been up it a dozen times to get away from Dudley's gang, and he was up it now before Crane had finished his second lie, scrabbling on the tin with his shop-bought bread tumbling into the bins below, up onto the top of the wall where a grown man could not follow at speed, and he ran along the wall's top with the drop on both sides, quick and sure. 6 years old and light and fast and running for his life along a 2-brick wall in the dusk, while below him Crane paced him without hurrying, because Crane knew and Harry knew that a wall ends. Harry ran and did his arithmetic as he ran, because arithmetic was the one thing that never deserted him. The wall ran 40 feet to the corner. Crane below covered the same 40 at a walk, unhurried, saving himself because he had seen the corner too and knew what waited there, which was nothing. A boy on a wall has exactly as many moves as the wall has ends, and both of Harry's ends were shut, and the drop on the garden side was onto glass, and the drop on the alley side was onto Crane, and there was no third side, because walls do not have 3 sides. He knew all of it before he was halfway along, and ran anyway, because the alternative to running while you think is stopping while you die, and because somewhere at the back of the arithmetic there was a coin, and a name, and a promise that he was not to wait until he was sure. This one ended at the corner where it met the tall back fence of the end house, and there was no roof to come down on and no branch to take, only the fence, too high and the drop too far, and Crane below and slowing now. Sure of it now, raising one heavy hand, and in the hand a short pale wand come from nowhere, and Harry, out of wall and out of tricks and out of town, did the last thing he had, the thing Bardock had told him not to wait to be sure about, and he was not sure, and he did not wait. He closed his fist around the true coin, dug from his cheek into his palm in one motion, and he said aloud into the blue dusk, "Bardock, Bardock, Bardock." The world did 3 things at once. The pale wand came up, and a cord of something not quite light leapt from it toward the wall where Harry stood, fast, meant to bind and drag, and the coin in Harry's fist went from warm to burning, a heat that was almost a sound, a struck bell felt in the bones of his hand. And between the wand and the boy, out of the seam where the brick wall met the dusk, the way Bardock came out of every dark, a shape was simply there, low and broad and terrible, and it took the cord of knot light on something held up in its fist, a short black bar of goblin iron, and the cord broke against it with a noise like a snapped string and a smell of burnt pepper. And Bardock stood on the top of the wall between Harry and the drop with his back to the boy and his teeth bared at the man below. "Cursebreaker," Bardock said, and the word was an insult in his mouth. "You point a wizard's stick at a child under the protection of the nation. Do you know what you have just spent, Ulrich Crane? You were a dead man for stealing from us. Now you are a dead man the nation will pay to make, and it will pay gladly, and it will take its time." Crane did not answer with words. He was a professional, and a professional does not debate on a losing square. He answered with the wand, fast, a second cord and a third, and Bardock took them on the black bar 1-2, moving in front of Harry along the narrow wall with a sureness no wide man could match. And where the cord struck the iron they died, and on the third Bardock did something with his free hand, a flick, and a thin bright line went from the goblin to the man and opened a red seam along Crane's wand arm from wrist to elbow, and Crane made no sound, but the wand dropped from fingers gone slack. And he stepped back once, reassessing the professional's step, and at the near end of the alley the fourth man had already gone, melted back into the dusk the moment the fight turned, because a hired lookout is not paid to die. "Down," Bardock said to Harry without turning. "The bins, now do not look back home and bolt yourself in and do not come out for anything, not the house on fire, not the fat man's shouting nothing until the coin is warm. Go." Harry went. He came down the tin roof and through the bins, and out the near end of the cut-through past the place where the fourth man had stood, and he ran. And this once Bardock had told him to run, so he ran, through the ordinary streets going on with their ordinary evenings, the telly light blue in the windows and a dog barking 2 gardens off and someone's tea in the air, all of it exactly as it had been that morning and every morning. And none of it knowing that a goblin was fighting a cursebreaker on a wall behind the butcher's. And Harry ran through the middle of it with his empty hands and his breath sawing, and got home and over the gate and worked the bolt and lay down in the dark of the cupboard and shook quietly so no one would hear for a long time, and the coin in his fist cooled slowly from burning to warm to the ordinary warmth of a thing held tight, and that was how he knew Bardock was alive. And that was the only thing he let himself know, because it was the only thing he could bear. Above him the house went through its night noises as though nothing in the world had happened, because as far as the house knew, nothing had. Across the town in the nameless white van pulled up now in a lay-by beyond the ring road. Silas Vane bound Ulrich Crane's arm by the light of a wand held between his teeth, and did not once ask how it had happened, because he had already been told the only 3 things that mattered, and he was turning them over one by one in the cold clockwork behind his eyes. The watcher was a child. Vane had suspected it since the feather. The wall had confirmed it. A child of 5 or 6, small, quick, local, unremarkable, precisely the kind of nothing a careful man overlooks and a wise man never does. Vane had been the careful man. He entered the error without heat, as he entered all his errors in the account he kept of his own fallibility, which was a longer account than his enemies believed and a shorter one than his conceit would have liked. The child was guarded by the nation. That was the second thing, and it changed the weather of everything. A goblin had come out of a seam in a brick wall and broken Crane's binding on a bar of black iron and opened his arm to the bone and named the nation's protection over a muggle-raised whelp in a Surrey alley, which meant the goblins had not merely smelt the false gold. They had reached above their own floor into the daylight and laid a hand on Vane's own trail and found a child at the end of it and taken the child up. Goblins did not guard what they did not value and did not value what they did not mean to use, which gave him the third thing, the one that mattered, the one Crane in his pain could not see. If the nation guarded the child, the nation knew. And if the nation knew, then the deep road on the night of the reckoning would not be open and empty and unsuspecting. It would be a trap laid and dressed and waiting, and the 3 of them would walk down into it as thieves and find themselves prey. A lesser man would have run. Vane had watched lesser men run the whole of his life and had grown rich on the vaults they abandoned. He sat in the back of the van with his colleague's blood drying on his gloves and felt the situation clarify, as a hard situation always clarified for him, into a single clean line. They knew the manner of his coming. They did not know that the manor had a second face, because Voss had made 2 things that summer, not 1. She had made the writ that read true, which the goblins now expected, and around which they would build the whole of their trap. And she had made in the deep spring, before Crane was ever careless, a second and smaller thing that Vane had spoken of to no one but Voss, a thing that did not open the deep locks but folded a man past them once briefly through the seam the reckoning tore in the wards, and that no trap keyed to the writ would so much as notice, because it was not the writ, it was the wound the writ left behind it. Let them lay their snare at the front door. He would come through the crack the front door made in the wall when it opened. "We do not move the date," Vane said aloud to Crane to the dark. "We do not change the prize, we change one thing only, we take the child first." Crane's eyes came up. "Alive if he comes quiet, and if he does not, then dead will do. A child the goblins have gone to this length to guard is a child worth holding in my hand when I walk down onto their road. because a nation that has begun to prize something will bargain for it, and a nation that will bargain is a nation whose trap has a door in it. Find me the boy Crane. You have his size and his streets in 3 days. Find the cupboard he crawls into at night. The next time there will be no wall to climb and no goblin quick enough, because we will not come to him in an alley. We will come to him in his sleep. Mrs. Fig came the next morning, and she came changed. She came to the door with a tin of her dreadful cake, a neighbor returning a kindness, and Aunt Petunia, who found Mrs. Fig tiresome but useful, let her sit in the kitchen a while. And Mrs. Fig asked might the boy carry her shopping home. It was heavy and her hip was bad, and Aunt Petunia, glad to be rid of Harry for an hour, said he might, and so Harry walked Mrs. Fig the long way round to Wisteria Walk with a bag of tins in each hand, and halfway there on the quiet stretch by the allotments. Mrs. Fig stopped and set down her bag and looked at him, and her old face was gray. There was fighting behind the shops last night, she said low. One of the watchers felt it. Goblin work and curse work in a muggle alley not 4 streets from where you sleep. I have kept your secret 9 days, Harry, against everything I was ever told, because you asked me to think first, and I thought, and I held my tongue. I cannot hold it any longer. Last night I sent word, not up the ladder you feared. I sent it straight to the top of the ladder, to the one man above all the grooves in the drawers, to the one who set me here, because whatever else he is not in Vane's pocket, and he is the only power in this world strong enough to stand between you and what came down that alley. I sent word to Dumbledore. She searched his face, and this morning I had my answer. Harry stood with a bag of tins in each hand and waited, because he had learned that the shape of an answer is in how a person gets to it, and Mrs. Fig was getting to it slowly, the way you get to a thing that has hurt you. He was kind, she said at last. He is always kind, that is the terrible part. He thanked me. He said I had done right to watch and right to write, and that I was not to worry, that the boy's safety was and had always been his first care in all the world. Her mouth worked. And then he told me what was to be done, and what was to be done was nothing. The matter of the goblins, he said, is a matter for the ministry and the proper offices, which are seized of it and will act in their season, and it is not for an old squib or a small boy to be tangling in the affairs of banks and treaties. The best and only service I can do you, he wrote, the very best, is to keep you close and quiet and out of it, to let no goblin near you, to send you nowhere and let nothing come, and to trust that the proper authorities in the fullness of time will set the proper things right. She said the words slowly, each one weighing a stone. The proper authorities, Harry, the proper offices, that is where the goblins' letters went for 9 years, into the proper offices. And he is sending you there too, wrapped up kind and safe, into the very drawer, and he does not know it, because he has never once in his long wise life believed that the drawer was anything but empty. She took a folded paper from her coat and did not give it to him, only held it, gripping it as a thing she was arguing with. He signed it himself, she said, his own hand. Do you know how rare that is, a letter in his own hand to an old squib who minds a boy? He thinks it a great kindness, and it is, and that is the whole trouble with him. He is kind the way the sun is warm, over everything, without looking, and a man who warms everything cannot see the one corner that wanted cold. He tells me here that he has known hardship, that he learned young what it is to lose your own to forces too large to fight, and that he will not stand by and see the same waste made of you, and that keeping you clear of great matters until you are grown is the last gift he can give the memory of your mother. Her voice caught. And every word of it is true and kind and meant, and every word of it, if I obey it, puts you and the little folk both in the ground. I have read it 11 times, hunting for the wickedness in it, so that I might refuse it with a clean heart. There is none. That is what has shaken me past bearing. He is not wrong as a bad man is wrong. He is wrong as a good man is wrong, which nothing on earth can argue with, because it will not hear itself doubted. For a moment neither of them said anything. A bee went over the allotment fence and worked along a row of beans. He means to save you, Mrs. Fig said, by taking you out of the only fight that can save the ones who are protecting you. If I do as he says, I take away the goblins' eyes above the ground, which is you, 4 days before the night they need those eyes most, and I hand Vane a quiet town with no watcher in it. And if I do not do as he says, then I am an old woman who has, for the first time in 15 years, decided she knows better than Albus Dumbledore, and God help me for the arrogance of it, and God help you if I am wrong. She picked her bag back up and her hands were not steady. So I am asking you, child, because I find I cannot ask him and I cannot ask myself, and there is no one else. Do I obey the wisest man alive and keep you safe and let the goblins fall? Or do I disobey him and keep you in the fire, on the word of a 6-year-old and a coin, because the 6-year-old has been right about every single thing all summer and the wisest man alive has been wrong about the one thing that matters for 9 years running? Harry set down his bags of tins. He thought about it properly longer than he had ever thought about anything, because it was the largest question anyone had ever asked him, and because a bee was working the beans and the sun was warm and Mrs. Fig's gray frightened face was waiting, and because he understood, standing there, that she was not really asking him whether to keep him safe. She was asking him to choose to be unsafe out loud, so that if it went wrong it would be a thing they had chosen together and not a thing she had done to him. It was the most honest thing a grown-up had ever offered him, and he met it with the most honest thing he had. He's not wrong because he's stupid, Harry said slowly, working it out as he said it. He's wrong because he's sure, that's worse. Vane got in because everybody was sure the door didn't need locking. And now Dumbledore wants to lock me up safe behind the same sure door, and he can't see that the safe side of that door is where the letters go to die. He looked up. If you keep me out of it, the goblins lose, and if the goblins lose, they stop being what they are, and Bardock fought a man on a wall last night so I could run home, and I'm not going to pay him back by hiding while he loses everything. I don't want anything, Mrs. Fig, that's what makes them trust me, but that's not the same as not doing anything. I found it, it's mine to finish, don't send me to the drawer. Mrs. Fig looked at him a long moment, and something in her old face settled, the way a scale settles, and she nodded once, and it cost her everything she had spent 15 years believing. Then I disobey him, she said quietly. The first time, and I should think the last, because there will not be much of me left over if we are wrong. I will not tell him you refused, I will tell him nothing at all, which is its own kind of lie and the only kind I have the stomach for. And I will do the one thing he did not forbid, because it never crossed his mind that an old squib could. She started walking again, slow, along the allotment fence. I will carry a message the other way, not up the ladder to the proper offices, down to whoever it is that comes to you in the dark. Because if the wizards mean to sit on their hands in their proper season, then the little folk had best know that they stand alone above the ground as well as below it, save for one boy and one old woman who have decided, between them and against all sense, to stand with them. They walked the rest of the way to Wisteria Walk without speaking, and Harry carried her tins to her door, and at the door she put her bird-light hand on his head for a moment, which she had never done, and said nothing, and went in, and Harry walked home the long way round past the church, where the clock said 20 to 6 and was, as ever, 4 minutes early, counting the town toward a night the town would never know had come. 3 days now till the 9th. He walked home through a little winging that had never in its life been more itself. Lawnmowers, a sprinkler ticking over a green square of grass, the man at number 11 washing a car that did not need washing, 2 doors down a wireless playing the cricket, the slow, safe drone of a summer nobody thought could end. Harry looked at the whole ordinary sunlit street, and understood that in 3 days men would go down under the world to break the oldest bank in it, and that a curse breaker meant to lift a boy out of one of these very houses in the dark, and that not one soul mowing or washing or dozing to the cricket would ever know a thread of it had happened. And that precisely this was the thing being defended, the right of a whole town to go on knowing nothing, safe behind a door it did not know was there, kept by a people it had never once thanked. He found he did not mind being the only one who knew. He had always been the only one who knew things. It was only that, for once, the thing was worth the knowing. That night the coin warmed, and Bardock came, and there was a white scar along the goblin's jaw that had not been there before, and Harry looked at it and did not ask, because some things you did not ask, and Bardock looked at Harry looking and gave the short, rough sound that might have been approval. You called at the right moment, Bardock said. Not too soon, when I would have shown myself for nothing, and not too late, when there would have been nothing left to show myself for. That is a very hard thing to judge, and grown wizards judge it worse than you did. Crane will live. He will carry the arm I gave him to his grave, and his grave will not be long in coming, but he will live to tell Vane what he learned in that alley, which is the whole of why I let him crawl away. The bird-bright eyes were steady. Understand what he tells Vane. He tells him the Watcher is a child. He tells him the child is guarded by the nation, and he tells him, therefore, that the nation knows. Vane will hear all three, and he will not flinch, because Vane never flinches, and that is our danger now, because a clever man who learns his trap is known does not abandon the prize. He builds a second trap inside the first. From tonight, Harry, we are not the only ones laying snares for the 9th, so are they, and they know we are watching, and we do not yet know what they have built to greet us. He was quiet a moment, and then he said a thing Harry had not heard him say before. I told the council what you did on the wall, that you did not run at the shut end, that you went up and along and out of a wide man's reach, and called the nation's name at the one instant it could be answered, and not a breath before. Ragnar heard it in silence, and when I had done he said only this, and bid me carry it to you. He said, the boy keeps faith with those who keep faith with him, and asks nothing, and this is the whole of what an oath is before the words are put to it. He said, we have not named a human blood sworn in 800 years, and I had thought never to hear the question raised again in my life, and now a child has raised it without knowing the words exist. Bardock looked at him. I do not tell you this to swell your head, which is too sensible to swell. I tell you because you should know, going into these last 3 days, that you are no longer, to my people, a useful human with a good eye. You are a question the council has begun to ask itself. And Gringotts does not ask a question idly, nor answer one in haste, nor ever, once it is answered, unsay it. Now bolt yourself in, count your days, and be ready, because I do not think Vane will wait for the 9th to come to you again. When the goblin had gone, folding himself back into the dark between one breath and the next, Harry lay in the cupboard with the coin against his gum and the book against his skin and the count running clean behind his eyes. 3 days. He was 6 years old, and a curse breaker meant to come for him in his sleep, and the wisest wizard in the world had signed his own kind name to the order that would bury him, and a nation 800 years silent on a question had begun, because of him, to ask it again. He should not have been able to hold all of that at once. He held it. He had been holding things too big for him the whole of his life, and this was only the biggest, and holding was still what he had in the place where other children had help. He did not sleep much, but he did not shake again either. The shaking had been for the alley, and the alley was done, and what came next would want his hands steady, and so, lying in the dark, he made them steady, as he had made every hard thing in his life into a number he could carry, and he counted himself down toward the 9th. Chapter 5 and Chapter 6, The Reckoning, Part 1. They came for Harry on the night before the 9th, and the goblins came for him first, and the whole of it turned on a margin of about 4 minutes, which was, Harry would think much later, the most fitting thing in the world. He was awake when it happened, because he had stopped truly sleeping 2 nights before, and he lay in the cupboard fully dressed under the thin blanket with his shoes on and the false coin in one and the book against his skin and the true coin in his fist, not his cheek, his fist, because Bardock had said be ready and Harry did not do things by halves. So he was awake and listening, and that was why he heard the difference in the house. It was not a sound, it was the ending of a sound. The fridge in the kitchen hummed all night, every night, a note so constant Harry had stopped hearing it years ago, and at 11 minutes past 1 by his count, the hum stopped, and the silence it left was so loud it woke the whole of him at once. A fridge does not stop for nothing. A fridge stops when something has reached into the house and laid a stillness over it, a careful, professional hush, the kind of quiet a man makes around himself when he means to move through a sleeping house and wake no one. Harry lay under his blanket with his eyes open in the dark and his fist tight on the coin, and understood that Vane had come, exactly as he had promised Crane he would, to take the boy in his sleep. He did not move. He had learned over 6 years of a bigger creature moving through a small house, the whole grammar of another person's stealth, and he read Vane's now as easily as a page. The fridge silenced, so its hum would not cover a footstep the intruder needed to hear. The stairs not creaking, which meant Vane was not on them, which meant Vane had not come in by the front and up, but by some other, closer, quieter way, a way that put him already on the ground floor a few feet from the cupboard door. Harry lay in the dark and did the arithmetic of it and found the answer cold and simple. There was one door to the cupboard, and it bolted from the outside, and a man who could draw a bolt from the outside without a hand was a man for whom a bolted door was no door at all, only a suggestion, and the suggestion was about to be declined. He had known, lying awake these 2 nights, that if it came it would come like this, and he had made his plan for it, which was no plan at all, only a corner and a coin and a promise not to wait until he was sure. He was not sure. He was never going to be sure. He got ready to be unsure very fast. Then the coin in his fist went warm and warmer, and Harry did not wait to be told twice. He rolled off the mattress onto the floor of the cupboard, silent, and pressed himself into the far corner behind the stacked paint tins. And he had just got small when the cupboard door, which was bolted on the outside, which no one could open from within, opened from without a sound, the bolt drawing itself back the way the padlock had drawn itself back on the very first afternoon of the whole long summer. And a shape filled the low doorway, stooping, and a hand came in unhurried. Feeling along the mattress in the dark for a sleeping child that was not there, the hand found the warm hollow where Harry had lain and went still. "Clever boy," said Crane's low, even voice, almost fond, into the dark of the cupboard, and his hand closed on the blanket and threw it back. And in that half-second, while the curse-breaker's weight was forward and his attention on the empty bed, the paint tins in the far corner were not the only thing in the corner, because the corner had filled silently with a second dark, and something small and terrible came up out of it under Crane's reaching arm. Harry never saw the whole of what happened next, because he was told, in the same half-second, not to. A hard, dry hand closed over his eyes, and another closed over his mouth, and he was lifted, and there was a sound very close by, a short, wet, economical sound, and Crane's low voice made a noise it had not made in the alley. And then the world tipped and slid, and Harry was being carried, fast and low, not up the hall toward the front door, but the other way, toward the cupboard's back wall, which was not, turned out, a wall either, and there was the smell of cold water and iron. And the ordinary house was gone, and Harry was in the underroad with Bardock's hand still over his eyes and Bardock's voice in his ear saying, "Do not look back, do not look back, it is done, you are away." And Harry did not look back, and behind them a wall that had never been a wall became a wall again, and sealed the cupboard and the curse breaker and the ended sound altogether into the ordinary dark of number 4 Privet Drive, where Aunt Petunia would find in the morning. A bolted, empty cupboard and no boy in it, and no way on earth to explain either, and would decide because it was easier that the ungrateful child had simply run away at last and would not be sorry. Crane, Harry said when he could, when the hand had come off his eyes and they were moving down the red-lit road at a pace that ate the distance. He found he had to ask, though he already knew, because knowing and hearing were different, and he had promised himself the truth all summer. Crane will not trouble the ninth, Bardock said. His voice was flat and final and carried no relish in it, only the closing of an account. He came into a child's sleeping place with a wand in his hand, under the protection of the nation, 3 times warned. There is no court above the ground or below it that would ask me a second question about it. Do not spend a thought on him. He spent none on you. The goblin did not slow. Vane sent him alone, which tells me the whole of what I need. Vane spent Crane as he spent everything, a coin laid down to learn the price of a thing. He wanted to know whether we would take the bait of you, and now he knows we will, and now he knows we have you below, and that is exactly, precisely what he wished to learn, and I have given it to him, because there was no way to save you tonight that did not also tell him where you are, and a live boy who tells Vane a truth is worth more than a dead one who tells him nothing. Bardock glanced up, and the bird-bright eyes caught the red light. He is not coming for you now, Harry. He has what he wanted from you. Now he is coming for the vault tomorrow on the reckoning, and he is coming knowing we are ready, which means he has something we have not seen. Ragnock wants you at the deep counting before the wards come down. Every eye we have is worth 10 tonight, and yours, it seems, is worth 100, and the council has decided against 800 years to spend it. They brought him down past the doors and the dark lake with its one pale watching eye down to the deep counting, a low stone gallery above the mouth of the deep road, and there the council of the nation had gathered, not on their high bench now, but standing in dark harness sewn with bright wire, and Ragnock stood at their head. And when Harry was brought in, the old grey creditor looked at him a long moment and then did a thing that made the whole gallery go still. He inclined his head, a degree, no more. The High Council of the Goblin Nation bent his neck a single degree to a human child of 6, and every goblin present marked it, and Harry marked it, and did not understand the whole of what it cost or what it promised, but understood that it was not nothing, that it was, in a place where a bowed head was a currency older than gold, a very great deal. Tell me the clock, Ragnock said. The auditor says the whole of tomorrow may hang on a clock. Tell me the clock, child, in your own words, and leave nothing out. So Harry told them the clock. The men keep no watches, he said, standing in the middle of the stone floor with the deep road breathing cold up out of the dark beside him. I watched them all summer, and none of them ever carried the time, so they borrowed it. They set everything they did to the church clock in Little Winging, because a bell carries through a shut door and tells the same time to all of them at once. And I know, because I'm the only one who ever bothered to count it, that the church clock is wrong. It's fast, 4 minutes fast every day all summer, checked against the pips on the radio. So whatever they've planned for tomorrow, whatever time they think it is when they move, it's really 4 minutes earlier than that. They'll move 4 minutes before they mean to, because their clock lies to them, and they don't know it lies, because you have to be a boy with nothing to do to know a thing like that. He looked up at the ring of ancient faces. That's the clock. I don't know what you do with it, but I know it's true, and I know it's mine, and I know nobody up there is going to catch it but me. The oldest goblins of the world stood in the deep gallery and were silent, and then the one Bardock had named the Aesir, the smith with the burned hands, spoke, half to himself, in a voice gone strange. The reckoning does not fall by any clock of wizards, he said slowly. It falls by the turning of the deep, which we mark by the 3rd stroke of our own great bell, the tally bell that has hung at the root of the bank since before the road above was paved. We ring it true, we have rung it true for 1,000 years, and the wizard, keying his forged writ to the moment the ward's thin, has no ear to hear our bell from where he waits, and so he counts himself in by the only bell he can hear, the wizard's church, 4 minutes fast. He raised his burned face to Ragnock. He will present his writ at the deep lock 4 minutes before the wards are down to receive it, 4 minutes before the vault will answer. He will stand at the threshold in the one window in 10 years when the old ward is falling, and the new is not yet risen, exposed, committed, with a forged writ in his hand that the dying ward will feel as alive because the dying ward is still, for those 4 minutes, awake enough to feel. The child has handed us the exact quarter minute the thief is blind, and we are not. The Aesir's teeth showed. We do not need to break his plan. We need only ring our own bell true, as we always have, and be standing at the threshold in the 4 minutes his own clock is stolen from him. He will walk onto the anvil and lay his own neck upon it and think the hammer 4 minutes away. A sound went round the gathered council, low and hard and hungry, the sound of a great many old creditors watching a debt come due, and Ragnock raised his hand and it stopped. So we will do, the High Council said. The trap is the threshold of the deep lock, and the spring is our own true bell, and the frame of it, the one piece that makes the whole hold together, is the counting of a wizard's castaway who kept a broken clock in his head for no reward. Mark it, all of you. Mark where the saving of the nation came from tonight, and mark it well, for there will be a reckoning of that too after this one, and I mean to be alive to hold it. He turned to Bardock. The boy is not to stand at the threshold. He is the frame. A frame is not spent in the fire. Set him in the high gallery above the deep road, behind the old wardstone, where he may see all and be seen by none, with a guard of 3, and there let him watch, for his eyes catch what hours pass over, and if the thief has a face beneath the face we expect, the boy will read it before any of us. Now go to your places. The bell is an hour off. The reckoning has begun. Bardock carried Harry up to the high gallery himself, though it was not an auditor's work, and set him behind the leaning wardstone and crouched a moment beside him in the dark while the 3 guards took their places along the rail. "You have done your part," the goblin said. "The clock was your part and you have given it, and by every right you should be 100 fathoms up in a county away, asleep in a cupboard, knowing nothing. Remember that whatever you see from up here, what comes now is ours, not yours. If it goes well, you will watch us close the account and you will go home. If it goes ill, you will still do nothing, because there is nothing a child can do on a deep road full of curse work but die on it and undo the one true thing he built. You are the frame. A frame holds still while the picture is made. Can you hold still, Harry Potter, if it goes ill?" Harry looked down at the deep road, at the hundreds of goblins ranged along it, at Bardock's white new scar and his black iron bar, and he told the truth, because he had promised the truth all summer and would not start lying to a goblin on the night it mattered most. "I don't know," he said. "I've never had anything worth not holding still for before." Bardock looked at him a long moment, and then made the short, rough sound that in a goblin might have been a laugh, or might have been a thing with no name in any tongue Harry knew. "That," he said, "is the truest answer you have given me yet, and the most dangerous, and I find I would not have you give any other." He straightened. "Hold still if you can, call my name if you cannot, and Harry, whatever the account costs tonight, it is a debt the nation chose to take, and no part of it is yours to carry. That is not comfort. Goblins do not give comfort. It is a fact, and I give it to you because it is true, and because you have taught me this summer that a true thing set in a small boy's hands is worth more than all the comfort there is." Then he was gone, down to the deep road, and Harry was alone with his 3 guards and the hole falling dark below him. And the reckoning had begun, and from behind the leaning wardstone, Harry saw the oldest magic in the hidden world wake up beneath him, and there is no plain way to tell it, because it was not a plain thing. The tally bell rang its first stroke, and it was not a sound so much as a change in the weight of the world. It came up out of the root of the bank, from somewhere below even the deep vaults, below the dragon, below the water, a single vast note that Harry felt in his teeth and his chest and the soles of his feet, and everywhere the gold in the walls, the 10,000 veins of it that lit the deep, dimmed all at once, as though the note had drawn a breath in through them. The deep road below went dark and then relit in a color Harry had no name for, a deep drowned red gold, the color of the inside of a closed eye, and along its whole length the great round vault doors, the doors with no keyholes, began, one after another down into the dark, to sing. Each door had its own note, and the notes together made a chord so low and so old that Harry felt his eyes sting with it and did not know why. And the goblins on the deep road below, hundreds of them now, ranged along it in dark harness, lifted their voices and sang back to the doors in the language that was all edges. And the doors and the goblins answered one another, the maid and the makers, in a rite that had been sung on that spot every 10 years for 1,000 years, the reconsecration of the deep. The laying down of the old ward and the raising of the new, and for the length of it Harry forgot the ninth and forgot Vane and forgot even the count, and simply watched, 6 years old, a human child looking on the deep heart of a world that no human had been meant to see, and the word for what he felt was awe, and it was the second time that summer the goblins had given him a feeling too large for him that did not crush him but lifted him. And he thought that if he lived he would spend the rest of his life trying to deserve having seen it. The rite did things to the deep that Harry felt more than saw. The cold water in the far dark, the lake with its one blind eye, rose and fell once hugely in time with the singing, so that the whole underground sea seemed to breathe with the doors. The red light in the walls ran like slow blood. And twice along the deep road, a vault door that had given its note fell silent and darkened, its ward laid down, waiting bare and unguarded in the 4-minute gap for the new ward to rise. And in those 2 dark doorways Harry felt, even from the high gallery, the particular hollow chill of a thing that is, for a little while, not locked. He understood then in his body, and not only in his counting, what Vane had bought with his 10 years of patience. Not a way to break a lock, but a way to arrive at a lock in the one breath of the one night in 10 years, when the lock was neither shut nor open, but only briefly undone. And he understood that the goblins knew this too, had always known it, and had kept the deep road so fiercely for 1,000 years precisely, because the reckoning was the single hour their fortress went soft, and that this was why no one in all that 1,000 years had ever been let near it who was not of the nation. Until now. Until a wizard turned out of the tunnels had carried the secret of the soft hour out in his head and sold it and come back to spend it. Far above the drowned gold deep, in the marble dark of the public bank where the day's tellers had long gone home, 3 figures came down a stair that was on no plan a wizard held, and Silas Vane counted his own descent as carefully as the child he had failed to lift that night counted everything. Gru had got them in, which was the whole use of Gru. A ministry liaison to the Goblin Treaty carried a writ of inspection that opened the upper doors after hours, and on the eve of a reckoning, when the bank turned all its attention inward and downward to the right, an inspector and his two clerks descending the treaty stair drew no eye that was not already fixed on deeper things. It was a door held open 11 years by a cornered man's signature, and Vane walked through it as he had walked through every door of his long grey career, without hurry, without gratitude, as a thing owed. They came to the downfall at the second gallery, the thin cold sheet of falling water across the whole width of the way, and here Voss slowed, and here even Vane felt the old cold the water through, because the downfall unmade a lie, and the three of them carried nothing else. He had planned for it as he planned for everything. Walk through, he said, and they walked through, and the water stripped them as it stripped every soul that passed, and showed them for what they were, and what they were was not that night a crime. Gru was an inspector truly by the letter, and the water left him an inspector, sodden and grey. The false gold in the case at Voss's side showed under the water for exactly what it was, false, and false gold carried down into a bank is no theft, only a curiosity, and the water let it by. And the forged writ, when the water fell upon it, did not change, did not smoke, did not show one thread of the forgery in it, because Cressida Voss had signed it in the deep manner at the root of the goblin's own craft, and the water, which knew a wizard's lie in an instant, looked at her work and found a truth. It reads true, Voss said low, and there was the craftsman's quiet certainty in it under the strain, and Vane said, I never doubted it, which was a lie, and the downfall was behind them and did not catch it, because the downfall caught only the lies a man carried, never the ones he told. But the dull small thing in the lining of Vane's coat, the second thing, the thing Voss had made in the deep spring and no water had ever touched, the downfall did not read at all, because it was not a lie, not a disguise, not a forgery. It was a wound waiting to be given, and you cannot pour the truth out of a knife. They went down past the carts standing idle on their rails for the right, and Vane looked once at the deep road opening below, at the drowned gold light and the singing and the great doors giving up their notes, and felt nothing where a younger man might have felt the pull of the old craft he had been thrown out of and come back to rob. He had burned that out of himself years ago, on purpose, the way a man cauterizes a wound to stop it costing him. It was the burning that made him what he was, and what he was the only man alive who could stand on the lip of the deepest place in the world, in the middle of its holiest hour, and see it only as a lock and a timing and a 4-minute door. At the lip of the road he stopped his two and named the plan aloud one last time, coldly, the way a surgeon names the cuts before the first is made. You go to the threshold, he told Voss, you and Gru. You present the writ at the deep lock at the third bell, as we have always said, and you open it, and you begin the loading, and you make no haste and no noise, and you behave in every way as the whole of our purpose, because you are tonight the whole of our purpose, as far as anyone watching is to believe. Voss's gloved hands were still on the case. She had understood somewhere on the stair the thing Vane had never quite said, and Vane, who did not insult his people with softness, did not soften it now. If the road is clean, you will load the vault, and we will all of us go home rich. If it is not clean, if we are expected, then you will be taken at the threshold, you and Gru and the writ, and the nation will close its account and believe it closed, and in the 4 minutes it spends closing it I will be through the deep door by the other way and out with the thing we came for and gone. He drew on his gloves, one finger at a time in the drowned light. You have served me 11 years, Cressida. If it is the second road, I will not forget it, and the nation in time will let you go, because you will have broken no deep law it can prove, only carried a writ it cannot call false. Gru it will keep, Gru has earned keeping. He turned toward the shadow at the base of the deep wall. Third bell, go and be the whole of our purpose. And Voss went, with the doomed clerk beside her and the slim case of lies in her hand, down toward the threshold and the trap in the jaws of the singing nation, and did not look back, because she was a professional, and Silas Vane stepped sideways into the shadow of a door and became, for 4 stolen minutes, the one thing on the deep road that no one was watching. The second stroke of the tally bell rang, and down the deep road at its far dark mouth, where the wards were thinnest in the falling, the thieves came in. They came the way Vane did everything, without hurry and without waste. Voss came first in her slate-gray coat, and she carried the slim case that had crossed Wisteria Walk in the summer, and beside her came Vane, gray and buttoned and cool, and behind them, hooded, a third that Harry could not make out from the high gallery, small and stooped, that carried nothing and kept to the shadow. No Crane would not trouble the ninth, and no fourth man, the hired lookout, was long gone. 3 of them come down into the deepest place in the world by a road that should have swallowed them, and Harry, behind his leaning stone, understood how they had come so far so easily. The road had let them. The goblins had let the road let them. Every goblin along the deep way stood as though they had not seen, sang, and let the thieves walk down the throat of the trap toward the threshold of the deep lock, where the true bell and the false clock would meet in 4 stolen minutes, and the account would come due. Vane felt it, Harry saw him feel it. Halfway down the road, the gray man stopped one step and looked about him at the singing goblins and the drowned gold light in the doors giving up their notes, and something in the set of his shoulders said that he had smelt in all that ancient welcome, the particular wrongness of a thing arranged, the too smoothness of a door held open. Voss looked back at him. Vane looked at the threshold ahead and at the goblins to left and right who did not look at him, and Harry, reading him from above as he had read Uncle Vernon 1,000 times, saw the gray man weigh the whole scene in an instant and arrive at the truth of it, that he was expected, that the road was a trap, that the threshold ahead was the jaws of it, and Vane smiled. From the high gallery, small and far, Harry saw the gray man smile for the first time all summer, a thin, cold, private smile, the smile of a man who has planned for exactly this and been proven right, and Harry's stomach dropped, because you do not smile to find yourself in a trap unless the trap is the thing you came to spring. Vane spoke to Voss low, and Voss went on toward the threshold alone with the slim case and the forged writ, and the hooded third went with her, and Vane himself stepped sideways off the deep road into the shadow at the base of the great vault doors and stopped before one of them, a door in the deep wall that Harry had not marked because it was like all the others, and drew from his coat not a writ but a small dull thing that caught no light at all. There, Harry breathed, and one of his goblin guards leaned close. There, look, he's left the others, he's gone to a door, it's the wrong door, he's not going to the threshold at all. And even as he said it, the third stroke of the tally bell rang out, the true third stroke, 4 minutes ahead of the church clock hour the thieves had counted on, and the trap at the threshold sprang. It sprang beautifully, and it sprang on the wrong prey. At the deep lock, the moment the third stroke fell, the singing goblins were singing no longer. They were a wall of dark harness and bright edges closing on Voss and the hooded third from every side at once, and Voss, caught with the forged writ half raised toward a lock that would not answer it for 4 minutes yet, was taken before she could speak a word. The slim case struck from her gloved hand, the writ seized, the whole beautiful decoy of her folded up in goblin steel in the space of 3 heartbeats. The hooded third threw back its hood, and it was a wizard Harry had never seen, a soft slack face, a ministry face, and he flung up his empty hands at once and was taken too. And Harry understood in a flash that this was Gru, that Vane had spent Gru exactly as he had spent Crane, sent the doomed clerk down to be caught at the front door with the forger, so that the goblins would have their thieves and their traitor and their forged writ all together in a neat closed account, and would believe the reckoning done. But Vane was at the wrong door in the shadow with a dull small thing in his hand, and the wards were falling, and in the 4 stolen minutes, while every goblin on the deep road was closing the trap at the threshold, Silas Vane laid the small dull thing against a deep vault door that no writ could open, and it opened for him. It did not open the way the writ would have opened it. Harry, high above, saw the dull thing drink the doors falling ward the way the false coin drank the green flame, saw the door not answer to a key but simply, briefly, forget itself, a wound opening in a wall too busy dying and being reborn to feel a small blade slipped into its seam. Vane had not brought a key to the front door. He had brought a thing that used the reckoning's own wound, the crack the great right tore in the wards, to fold himself through a door while the door was neither locked nor open but only for 4 minutes hurt. The goblins had built their trap to catch a forged writ at the threshold. Vane had never meant to use the writ. The writ was Voss, and Voss was the bait, and while the nation shut its jaws on the bait, the gray man walked through a wounded door into the deep vault the whole scheme had always been for, and was gone inside it. For a moment, one whole moment, the nation did not know it had been cheated. Down at the threshold the goblins were a tightening knot of victory. Voss, pinned and disarmed, grew on his knees with his soft hands over his head, the forged writ held up in a captain's fist like a taken banner, and along the deep road the song of the right went on because the right could not be stopped, and the drowned gold light poured down, and to every eye at the threshold the account was closed and the thieves were taken and the deep was saved. It was a complete and beautiful victory, and it was aimed 4 feet to the left of the truth, and only Harry, high above with nothing to do but count, could see the whole board and see that the most important piece was no longer on it. He counted them because counting was what he did when the world moved too fast. 2 thieves taken, the forger and the clerk. And the plot he had carried all summer had 3 faces in it, 3, the gray eye and the black square and the ringed woman, and the black square would trouble no one ever again, and the ringed woman was pinned at the threshold, and that left the gray eye, the counting man, the first and the worst of them, the one who had opened a padlock in the sun on the first afternoon of the whole long summer. And the gray eye was not at the threshold, and not in the knot, and not anywhere the nation was looking, because the gray eye had never been going to the threshold. The gray eye had spent the other 2 as he spent everyone, laid them down like coins to buy 4 unwatched minutes, and in those minutes he had walked through a wall. Harry stood up behind the leaning stone. One of his guards put out a hand to stay him and found him already past it. "He's in," Harry said, and his voice did not sound like his own. "He's in a vault, they've got the others, but he's in." He went through the door still. He was on his feet behind the leaning stone, and his 3 guards had gone rigid. one of them already turning to run the warning down to the deep road where every goblin was busy with Voss and Gru and the forged writ, and none of them was looking at the shadow at the base of the wall where a gray man had just walked through solid stone. "The bell," Harry said fast, working it as it came. "You rang the bell true, that's 4 minutes early, that's what caught the others, but the door he went through, when does it close? When do the new wards come up?" "At the last stroke," said the eldest of his guards, and its rough voice had gone tight. "The wards rise whole again at the fourth and final stroke of the tally bell, and seal every door on the deep road, and any soul inside a vault at the fourth stroke is sealed within it for the 10 years until the next reckoning, with no air and no light and no way out that has ever been found. When the fourth stroke." The goblin looked at the deep road, at the drowned gold light already beginning faintly to pale toward the ordinary red as the new ward gathered itself to rise, and Harry saw the answer in the old creature's face before it spoke. "Soon," it said. "Minutes. The right does not wait, and it cannot be stopped, and it cannot be slowed. At the fourth stroke the deep seals, thief or no thief, and the nation will have its 2 prisoners and its forged writ, and Silas Vane will be sealed alive in the vault he came to rob with all the time in the world and no way to spend it. We have one boy. It is only that we have won the wrong prize, and we will not know what he takes from that vault in his 4 minutes until we open it again in 10 years, if we ever dare." The goblin took Harry's shoulder to steer him back. "It is over. Come away. There is nothing now but to wait for the bell and count the dead." But Harry was not listening, because Harry was counting, and the count was wrong. He counted the goblins on the deep road, busy with their prisoners, many. He counted the ones turning now too late toward the shadowed door where Vane had gone, a handful, and the nearest of them was Bardock, breaking from the knot at the threshold, running the length of the deep road toward the wounded vault with his black bar in his fist and murder in his stride. And he counted the vault door itself, the one Vane had folded through, and he saw the thing that no goblin busy at the threshold had seen, and that he, high above with nothing to do but watch, could not fail to see. The door had not closed behind Vane. It stood the smallest crack ajar, a hand's width of wounded dark, because a door that has been folded past rather than opened does not know how to shut, and through that crack in the drowned gold light something was coming out, not Vane. Vane was still inside in his 4 stolen minutes, taking what he had come 10 years to take. What was coming out of the crack, low along the floor, unhurried, drawn by the wound in the ward or the smell of the right or some hunger 1,000 years chained, was a shape Harry had seen once before, from a bridge, as a single pale eye upon black water. The dragon had been at the deepest gate, and the deepest gate was this gate, and the fold that had opened the vault for Vane had opened in the same 4 minutes, the last thing between the deep road and the thing that guarded it. And now the guardian was loose on the deep road, with the whole singing nation caught flat-footed at the wrong end of it, and Bardock was running alone toward the crack with a bar of iron, and above it all, forgotten behind a leaning stone, was the one pair of eyes that had seen the whole shape of it come apart. Harry's 3 guards had seen it now too, the crack in the door and the low shape pouring out of it, and one was already gone, sprinting the gallery to raise a horn, and one had drawn a blade far too small for what was coming, and the third had both hands on Harry's shoulders to haul him back from the rail into the shelter of the stone. And Harry, in the half-second the hands closed on him, saw the whole of the wrong thing laid out below like a sum on a slate. Bardock alone, running the deep road toward a loose dragon and a wounded door, because Bardock was the nearest and Bardock did not stop. The nation, hundreds strong, packed at the far threshold around 2 prisoners it had already won, its back to the true danger, its ears full of its own singing. Vane inside the vault in his last stolen minutes, taking the thing he had waited 10 years to take. And the crack and the dragon, and no one in all that deep drowned dark close enough or free enough or quick enough to stand between the blind old guardian and the running goblin, but a boy behind a stone with a coin in his fist, and a voice too small to fill a hall this size. He filled it anyway. He had spent a whole summer learning that the smallest thing in the room was sometimes the only one who could see the whole of it, and there was no use in seeing the whole of a thing if you would not open your mouth. "Bardock," Harry shouted over the edge of the gallery into the vast drowned dark, and his voice was very small in it, and the goblin far below did not slow. "Bardock, the door, it's the dragon, the door's still open, and it's the drag." The dragon lifted its blind head at the sound of him. And far off, at the root of the world, the tally bell began to draw the breath that would become its 4th and final stroke. Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. Blood-sworn, the dragon turned toward the sound of Harry's voice, and Harry did the only thing left to a boy behind a stone, which was to think faster than a dragon. He had perhaps 3 seconds while the blind head swung and the great body dragged itself further out of the wounded door onto the deep road, and in those 3 seconds Harry laid every fact he owned side by side, quick and clean, as he had learned to lay them all summer, and one fact fit against another and made a third, and the third was a door out of the dark. The dragon was blind. Bardock had said so on the bridge, blind now and older than England. A blind thing does not hunt by sight. It hunts by sound, which was why it had turned toward him, and by scent, and the scent a dragon keeps above all others, the scent it has guarded 1,000 years and would know from the smell of its own heart, is the scent of the gold it was chained to keep. And the gold it was chained to keep was not in Harry's mouth or the goblin's harness or the walls of the deep. It was in the vault Vane had opened. It was in Vane's hands because Vane had just come out through the crack with it, a small dark casket held against his chest, the thing he had spent 10 years and 3 lives to lift, and it was the one thing in all that vast dark that smelled to the dragon of home. Bardock reached the door as Vane came out of it, and the fight was 3 moves long and Harry saw every one. Bardock struck low with the black bar, and Vane turned it on something in his sleeve and struck back with the pale wand, and a whip of knot light took Bardock across the chest and folded him down onto the stone. And he did not get up, and the black bar rang once on the ground and lay still, and Vane stepped over the fallen goblin without looking at him, casket to his chest, and turned up the deep road to run, and behind him the blind dragon lifted its head and could not find him. Because the whole deep road was a roar of goblin horns and goblin song and goblin boots, 100 sounds, and a blind thing in a storm of sound cannot tell the one footstep that matters from the 99 that do not. "Stop!" Harry screamed over the rail with the whole of his small body behind it, and his voice cracked the dark like a struck glass. "Everybody stop. Stop shouting, stop the horns, stand still, all of you, it's blind, it can't see, it hunts by sound, and it smells the gold, and HES got the gold. Go quiet and it'll take him, go quiet now." And the goblin nation, which had never in 800 years taken an order from a human, and had certainly never taken one from a human child of 6 shrieking from a gallery, did the single most extraordinary thing Harry ever saw it do. It obeyed him. Not because he had a right to be obeyed, he had none. It obeyed because Ragnak on the deep road heard the boy's voice and remembered the clock and the coin and the whole long summer of a child being right, and raised one grey hand, and the horns cut off, and the song stopped, and 800 goblins went still and silent in the same breath, still as the stone they were carved from 1,000 years before England had a name, so that the deep road, which a heartbeat before had been a storm, became in an instant the quietest place in the world. A held breath the size of a cathedral, and in that enormous silence there was exactly one thing moving, and one thing breathing hard, and one thing that smelled of the deepest gold in the world, and it was Silas Vane running. The dragon found him at once. Harry did not watch the whole of it, because Bardock had taught him that you did not need to watch the whole of a thing to know its weight, and because a part of him that was still 6 turned its face away. There was a rush of enormous displaced air, and a sound like a house coming down, and the grey man made one noise that had nothing cool in it at all. The first and last time all summer that Silas Vane made a sound with no calculation in it. And then there was the casket, spinning free across the stone into the drowned gold light, thrown clear as the dragon closed on the thing that had carried it. And there was, after that, no more Silas Vane to trouble the 9th or the 10th or any night again. And the deep road was silent once more, but for the slow, satisfied settling of a very old creature that had, after 1,000 years of waiting, at last caught something worth the wait. Then the goblins moved, and they were dragon handlers, and they had chains and long ancient patience, and they took the blind guardian by the neck it had never truly wished to leave, and led it, gorged and gentled, back through the wounded door to the deepest gate, and mended the door behind it with a working that closed the crack Vane had torn, and all of it was done in the last minutes before the bell, quick and sure, and without a wasted motion. A nation putting its house back in order around the ruin of the thing that had come to rob it, and the 4th stroke of the tally bell fell. It fell true on the true hour, 4 minutes after the church clock in a sleeping Surrey town had told a nobody's watch that the hour had already gone, and where its 3 brothers had drawn the wards down, the 4th stroke raised them, a single vast note going up through the root of the world, and along the whole deep road the great doors sang their notes one final time and sealed, the drowned gold light draining back to the ordinary red, the new ward rising whole and unbroken and locked for another 10 years. And the reckoning was over, and the deep was kept, and the nation had not lost what it was given to keep, which was the one thing a goblin cannot lose and remain a goblin, and Harry Potter, 6 years old, behind a leaning stone in the high gallery, sat down very suddenly on the cold floor with his back to the rail and found that his legs had stopped agreeing to hold him up. He did not stay down long. He got up because Bardock had not got up, and that was a fact that would not lie still. They let him down onto the deep road. He did not ask leave, and no one refused him, and he crossed the drowned stone to where the goblins had gathered around the fallen auditor, and they made room for him, which was its own kind of answer, and Harry knelt on the cold floor beside Bardock and looked at the burn the knot light had laid across the goblin's chest and did not know what to do about it, because he was 6, and there was nothing a 6-year-old knew to do. Bardock's eyes were open. The bird brightness was dimmed, but it was there, and it found Harry, and the wide, hard mouth moved. "Did it take him?" Bardock said. "Yes," said Harry, "with his own dragon, by your counting." Something moved across the burned old face that was not a smile and was better than one. "That is the cleverest death I have ever heard of, and I have heard of a great many, and I am sorry only that I shall have to hear the rest of it lying down." His breath went ragged and came back. I will not die of this, boy, so you may put that look away. I have taken worse from better and kept my counter the next morning. Goblins are hard to unmake, but I will lie here a while, and while I lie here you will do a thing for me, because I cannot rise to do it, and it must be done by someone the nation will hear, and I find to the astonishment of my whole long life that the someone is you. His hand found Harry's wrist, dry and long and cold, the false gold, veins swap. You will have left it in the vault in place of what he took, so the count would come out even and no one would know for 10 years that the true thing was gone. The vault is sealed now and cannot be opened for 10 years, and in 10 years the false gold will have had a decade to settle into the ledgers as truth, unless someone tells the nation tonight before the ink is dry exactly which gold in that vault is a lie. You are the only one alive who can, because you are the only one who ever learned to see it. Stand up, tell them the tell, give the nation back its true count. It is the last piece, Harry, and it is yours, and no one else can lay it down. So Harry stood up on the deep road of Gringotts among the oldest beings in the world, with a fallen goblin at his feet and the whole council of the nation turning to hear him, and he told them the tell, the thing he had found in an alley in June with a coin in his fist and the sun coming through a gap. The false gold doesn't cast a shadow, he said. That's how I knew the very first day. A real coin throws a real shadow, dark and honest, and the false ones throw a ghost of one, a paleness, because there's a lie inside them where the weight of a true thing should be. You can't see it in the dark, but in the light of the right, the deep gold light, you'll see it plain, because that light comes from your own true gold in the walls, and a lie can't throw a true shadow in true light. Whatever vein left in that vault to stand in for what he stole, it'll be the gold that casts no shadow when the deep light falls on it. Look for the gold with the ghost under it, that's the false, everything else is yours. The Aesir with the burned hands looked at him for a long moment, and then bowed his head low and said to Ragnarok, to the council, to the deep, the child has given us back our count. In 10 years, when the vault opens, we will know to the coin what was taken, because we will know to the coin what was left, and the thief's own cleverness, that would have hidden the theft for a decade, is undone by a boy who noticed that a lie has no shadow. I have kept the ledgers of this nation for 200 years. I have never once been handed a truer thing. And Ragnarok, High Council of the Goblin Nation, looked down at Harry Potter for a long, long moment, and then he said quietly to the whole gathered deep, mark it, mark all of it. The clock and the council and the dragon and now the count itself given back clean by the same small hand. There is a debt owing here that gold cannot pay, because it was not gold that was given, and a nation that pays its debts in the wrong coin is a nation that does not understand its own debts. We will speak, before this boy goes home, of how such a debt is paid. But first there is another debt to be spoken of, an older and a fouler one, and I see that the wizards have at last remembered they have a stake in this place, because one of them has just come down my road uninvited, and I have let him, because I have been waiting 9 years to say a thing to his face. Harry turned, and at the far mouth of the deep road, where the thieves had come in, an old man stood. He was tall and thin, and his hair and beard were long and silver-white, and he wore robes of a deep midnight blue that seemed to hold a little of their own light, and half-moon spectacles, and he carried no weapon that Harry could see and needed none, because the air around him was heavy with the particular gravity of great power held very still. He did not look like a villain. That was the first thing Harry understood, looking at him, and it was the hardest. He looked kind. He looked tired and kind and terribly, genuinely sad, and his eyes, very blue behind the spectacles, went first and at once to Harry, to the small boy standing on the deep road among the goblins, and something moved across his face, quick and complicated, that folded many things together and settled into none of them, and he said in a voice gentle and clear and carrying, Harry, oh my dear boy, you were never meant to be here. None of this was ever meant to touch you. Albus Dumbledore, said Ragnarok, and the name in the goblin's mouth was flat and cold and heavy as a paving stone. You will forgive me if I do not thank you for coming. You are 9 years late, and you have come now only because your squib went silent and your boy went missing, and it is the boy that has fetched you, not the 9 years of our letters. Do not mistake me for a fool who does not know why the wise arrive. You came for the child. You did not come for us. You have never once come for us. Dumbledore was quiet, and he did not deny it, and that Harry saw was the measure of the man, that he did not deny it. No, the old wizard said at last, I did not come for you, Ragnarok, I came for him. And you are right to name it, and right to name it as a fault, because it is one, and it is the same fault that brought us all to this road tonight, and I have known it was a fault for longer than I have been willing to say so. Then say so now, said Ragnarok. Say it here on the road they nearly emptied, in the hearing of the nation you failed. For 9 years my people laid our warnings before your ministry, and for 9 years your gentle hand turned them aside, not from malice. I will grant you that much and no more, but from a certainty. You were certain you knew our house better than we did. You were certain the goblins were a proud and frightened folk who saw thieves in every shadow, and that the peace was best served by soothing us and not by heeding us. And a thief heard how certain you were, and built his whole robbery inside the silence your certainty made, and it very nearly cost us everything we are. That is what your wisdom bought, Albus Dumbledore, not peace. a door left open 11 years that a child had to close because you would not. The old wizard bowed his head and the deep road was silent, and Harry watched the greatest wizard in the world stand in front of a nation he had wronged and take the weight of it without flinching and without excuse, and it was, in its terrible way, the most grown-up thing Harry had ever seen anyone do, and it taught him more about what a wrong is than any punishment could have. "You are right in all of it," Dumbledore said. "I believed I was keeping the peace. I was keeping my own comfort and calling it peace, which is the oldest lie the powerful tell, and the one I swore in my youth I would never tell, and told anyway for 40 years, because it is very easy to hear only the warnings that do not ask you to change your mind. Your letters asked me to change my mind about a people I had decided long ago I understood. I did not read them as warnings. I read them as the noise a proud folk make, exactly as you say, and I filed them where such noise is filed, and I taught a ministry to do the same, and I would be filing them yet, this very night, comfortable in my certainty, if a boy I hid in a cupboard and told everyone to overlook had not overlooked nothing, and counted what no one else would count, and carried the truth down into your dark himself, because there was no grown wizard left in England willing to hear it." He raised his head, and his blue eyes were wet, and he looked at Harry. "I owe you an apology, Ragnock, and I will make it in full and in the proper forms, and it will not be enough, and I will make it anyway. But first I owe one to a 6-year-old, and I find I can hardly bear to make it, because there is no form for it at all. Harry, I left you in that cupboard to keep you small and safe and hidden, and in doing so I taught the one person who could save this nation to be exactly the watchful, friendless, overlooked child who could. I was wrong about you in every way it is possible to be wrong about a person, and the worst of it is that my wrongness is the only reason we are none of us robbed tonight. I do not know how to hold both of those. I do not think I am meant to. I think I am only meant to say that I am sorry, and to mean it, and to do better, and to let you decide when you are grown whether better was ever good enough." Harry looked up at the old wizard for a long time, and he did not know what to say because he was 6, and no adult had ever apologized to him for anything in his life, and here was the wisest one of all of them apologizing for the whole shape of it, and it was too big to answer. So he answered the only part of it he could hold. "You're doing the thing Vane did," Harry said. "Being so sure the door didn't need looking behind that you never looked. He did it on purpose and you did it by accident, but it's the same door and I fell through it either way." He thought about it. "I don't hate you. I don't think I've got room to, but I'm not going to be small anymore. That was the deal you made for me and I'm not keeping it, because being small is what nearly let them win, and being the opposite of small is what stopped them, and I know which one I'd rather be now." Dumbledore looked at him, and something in the old face broke and mended, and he said very quietly, "No, no, I do not imagine you will ever be small again, and I find, God help me, that I am glad of it, though it will cost us both a great deal of peace." He turned to Ragnock and drew himself up, and the power came back into the air around him, banked but there. "The forger and the clerk are yours by every law, above the ground and below it, take them. The ministry will not ask after them, and if it dares it will answer to me, and I will make certain the answer is the truth this time, and the whole of it, laid before the Wisengamot in daylight, my own part first. The treaty has been broken these 9 years, and it was broken on my side of the table, and I will spend what is left of my long life mending it, beginning tonight. You have my word, which I know is worth less to you than it was an hour ago, and which I mean to make worth more before I die." "We shall see what your word is worth," said Ragnock. "Words are cheap above the ground, below it we keep them, and we have long memories, and we will hold you to every syllable of that one." He inclined his head a degree, the same degree he had given Harry. "But you have said the true thing to our faces on our own road, which no wizard of your rank has done in living memory, and that is a beginning, and a beginning is not nothing. Go home, Albus Dumbledore, the boy stays. There is a matter between the nation and this child that is ours alone to settle, older than your treaty, and no wizard, not even you, has any standing in it. You will have him back by morning in his cupboard, whole and safe, and exactly as troublesome as we found him. That is the nation's word. It is worth more than yours. Go." And the greatest wizard in the world, dismissed from the deep road of Gringotts by a goblin, looked once more at Harry and inclined his own head to him, lower than he had bent to Ragnock, and turned, and was gone up the dark toward the ordinary world, and the goblin nation turned all of it, the whole ancient assembled deep, to the small boy standing alone in the middle of its holiest place, and Ragnock raised his voice, and it filled the enormous dark. "Now," the High Council said, "the debt. Bring the old iron, bring the first gold and the last silver in the basin of the deep. We do a thing tonight that has not been done in 800 years, and I would have it done before the boy's blood cools from the fright of the dragon, so that the nation remembers it was done in the hour it was earned, and not weighed and haggled and shrunk in some later, colder council. Harry Potter, do you know what it is to be named blood-sworn to the Goblin nation?" "No," Harry said. "Then I will tell you, so that you take it knowing, because a thing taken in ignorance is not taken at all, and we do not do the deep magic on a child who does not understand what he is holding." Ragnock came down from where he stood, slow, ancient, and the whole nation drew close in a great ring around them. and somewhere the burned Aesir was bringing forward a basin of black iron on a stand, and into the basin others were pouring things that gleamed molten silver that gave off no heat, and a single ancient coin so worn its face was nearly smooth, and the basin when they had done held a still bright pool that was silver and gold at once and held the drowned light and gave it back changed. There is between goblin and wizard 3,000 years of blood, Ragnarok said, war upon war, betrayal upon betrayal, and a treaty that both sides have broken more times than either will admit. We do not love your kind, we are not built to. But once and once again across all those centuries, a wizard has dealt with us in the one coin we value above gold, which is truth freely given and profit freely foregone. And when that happens, when a human treats the nation not as a thing to be used but as a debtor and a creditor both, bound by the same law that binds us, then the nation may choose, if the whole council wills it, to fold that human into the covenant. Not as a goblin, you cannot be made a goblin, and we would not insult you or ourselves by pretending it. As a blood sworn, one whose blood is sworn to the nation and the nation as to him. It is the rarest thing we do. It has been done for a queen once and a curse-breaker once and a child who fed a starving goblin in a famine year 800 winters gone, and never since until, if the council wills it, tonight. He looked around the great ring of ancient faces, and he said a word in the language that was all edges, and the whole nation answered it with one word together, a sound like a mountain agreeing, and Ragnarok turned back to Harry. The council wills it, he said. Hear now what it grants and what it binds, for it is both, always both, that is the whole of what an oath is. What it grants you, from this night the nation is yours as you are the nation's. Wherever you go in the world, a goblin will know you, by the mark you will carry and by the smell of the deep on your blood, and will owe you truth and safe passage and shelter, and will lift no hand against you and suffer none lifted in its sight. Your gold, when you have any, is goblin kept, and no power on earth, no ministry, no wizard, no writ will move it or read it or touch it without your word, for it will be kept as we keep our own, which is to say kept until the mountains are dust. Your secrets told to a goblin are goblin kept, which is the safest keeping there is. And once, one time in the whole of your life, if you are in danger so great that you have no other card in all the world to play, you may make the blood call and close your hand on the mark and speak the nation's name, and the nation will come, all of it, from wherever it is, and stand between you and your death and ask no payment, because the payment was made tonight on this road when you were 6 years old and gave us back our house and asked for nothing. Ragnarok's filmed eyes held him. That is what it grants, now hear what it binds, for it is the heavier half. You are bound from this night to your last to the goblin code. You will never betray a goblin's trust, not to save your own life, not to save another's. A blood sworn who breaks faith is not punished. He is unmade, his mark burned out, his name struck from the deep, and there is no colder death our law knows. You will honor every debt you owe in full in the true coin all your days. You will keep the nation's secrets as the nation keeps yours, which is to say to the grave and past it. And you will carry always the knowledge that you are no longer entirely your own, that a part of you is sworn elsewhere, to a hard old people in the dark who will never let you go and never let you fall. That is the binding. It is not a gift, Harry Potter. It is a marriage of blood between a boy and a nation, and it cannot be undone by either while both draw breath. And I ask you now once, and you will answer plainly, as you have answered plainly all summer, and there is no wrong answer, only a true one. Do you take it? Harry stood in the ring of the oldest nation in the world, with the basin of silver gold light before him and a fallen friend behind him, and the whole weight of it come down on his 6-year-old shoulders. And he did the thing he did with every large thing that had ever been put on him. He held it, and it did not crush him, and he found that somewhere in the holding it had become a part of what held him up. He thought of the cupboard and the biscuit tin that was always empty, and the long summer of being the only one who knew, and the fact that no one in the world had ever sworn anything to him. Not his aunt, not his uncle, not the wise old man with the wet blue eyes who had left him in the dark to keep him safe. And here was a whole nation, the hardest and proudest people alive, offering to be sworn to him forever, and asking in return only that he be exactly what the summer had already made him, watchful, honest, true to his debts, and never small again. Yes, said Harry, I take it. And they did the deep magic on him, and there is no plain way to tell it, because it was not a plain thing. The Aesir took his hand, the small human hand that had counted the whole of it, and turned it palm up over the basin, and with a blade so thin Harry felt it as a line of cold and not a hurt at all, opened a single bright bead of blood at the base of his thumb, and let it fall, one drop, into the still silver-gold pool. And the pool took it. The whole basin of molten silver and ancient gold, and the drowned light of the deep drank that one drop of a 6-year-old's blood and turned, slowly, a color Harry had no name for and would spend the rest of his life trying to find again. And the nation began to sing, lo, the whole 800 of them, the song they had sung to the doors, but bent now, turned, aimed at him, and Harry felt the deep magic come up into him through his opened hand. Up his arm and into his chest and out along every road of his blood, cold and vast and old, and it went through him and found every true thing he had ever counted and knew them all. The milk bottles and the church clock and the shadow a real coin throws, and it knew them as its own because they were true, and the nation's whole law was built on the keeping of true things. And Harry Potter, who had never in his life belonged to anyone, felt himself, for one endless drowned gold moment, belong. And far off, all through the deep, in the sealed dark behind the great round doors, the vaults heard it. Harry felt them hear it. The whole keeping place of the world, the king's ransoms and the cursed things and the relics the wizards pretended did not exist, every locked and counted hoard down to the last coin, turned some blind old attention toward the deep road for the space of a heartbeat, and marked the new name sworn into the nation's blood, and knew him and would know him always, so that from that night a boy in a cupboard in Surrey was a thing the deepest and best guarded places on earth had, in their slow stone way, agreed to remember. Nothing counted into Gringotts is ever truly forgotten. Harry had just been counted in. When it was done, there was a mark on the back of his right hand over the bones where there had been nothing before. A thin, bright line of goblin silver worked into the skin itself, painless, permanent, in the shape he had known since the first afternoon of the whole long summer. The crossed circle with the tail, the mark from the garage door and the false coin in the underside of the dustbin lid, the sign of the nation, sworn now into his own flesh. It caught the deep light and held it. It would, he understood without being told, always be a little cold, the way the true coin had always been a little warm, and between the warm coin and the cold mark he would carry the nation with him out of the dark and up into the ordinary world and keep it there, secret, under a shabby sleeve, for the whole of his life. The true coin Bardock had given him in the dark on the first night, the plain worn galleon that had let him call the nation to a wall behind the butcher. As the Aesir moved to take back, gently, and Harry understood without being told that it had done its work and was needed no longer, because the thread it had held between the boy and the deep was a thread no more. It had become a rope, and the rope was the mark, and the mark did not need a coin to speak through. But Ragnarok stayed the Aesir's hand and looked at Harry and said, "No, let him keep it. It is worth one galleon, which is nothing to us and a fortune to him, and it was the first true thing ever given to this child and not taken from him, and a nation that has just sworn its blood to him will not begin by taking back the small kindness that led him to us. Keep the coin, blood sworn, spend it or hoard it or hold it in the dark when you're afraid. It is yours freely and there are no ribbons on it." Ragnarok looked at the mark and at the boy and inclined his head, and this time it was not a degree. It was a bow, low and full and given freely, the high council of the goblin nation bowing to a human child of 6 on the deep road of Gringotts, and behind him the whole nation bowed with him, 800 of the proudest beings on earth bending as one to a boy in a hand-me-down jumper, and Harry stood in the middle of it and did not know where to look, and understood that he was seeing a thing no living wizard had ever seen and none would believe, and that it was his, and that no one could ever take it away. "Rise, bloodsworn," said Ragnarok, though Harry was already standing. "It is the oldest greeting we have, and it does not mean stand. It means you have been down as low as a soul can go, and the nation has seen you there and finds you worth the raising. Go home now, be 6 a little longer, you have earned that too, and it is shorter than you think, and no oath in the world should cost a child his childhood before its time. But know all your days that you are not alone in the dark any more, and never will be, whatever the wise men do, because there is a people under the world who have sworn their blood to yours and will not forget it while one stone of Gringotts stands upon another. We do not forget, Harry Potter. It is the only thing we have never once failed to do." They carried him home before the birds, up the underroad with Bardock walking beside him, slow and bandaged and alive, because goblins are hard to unmake, and at the mouth of the passage between number 4 and number 6 Bardock stopped, as he had stopped on the first night, and looked at the boy with the mark on his hand and the coin against his gum and the summer between them. "You will not see much of us," the goblin said. "That is the way of it. A blood-sworn is not a goblin and cannot live below and must go up and be a wizard's child and grow among his own kind, and it will be years, likely, before the mark grows warm again with need. But it is there, and I am at my counter most days, and a boy who found his way to the bottom of the world once can find a teller who will send word to an auditor, if ever the day comes that he needs one." The bird-bright eyes held him, dimmed and steady. "You asked me on the first night for nothing but that someone who could stop them should know what you knew. I have thought about that a great deal, lying still these last hours. It is the only wage you ever named, and we have paid it and paid it over, and I find the account will not close because you gave the nation back itself and would take no coin for it, and a debt that will not close is the beginning of the only kind of friendship a goblin can truly have. So I will say the thing goblins do not say once in the dark where no one can hold me to it. I am glad it was you at that garage, Harry Potter. Out of the whole of England, I am glad it was you." Then he was gone, folded back into the dark, and Harry climbed the squeaking gate one last time and crossed the silver garden and worked the bolt with his wire and lay down in his cupboard and pulled the thin blanket over himself. And in the morning Aunt Petunia hammered on the door at 7 and told him he was a lazy, ungrateful boy and there were eggs to be done, and Harry got up and did the eggs and said nothing and was, to every eye in that ordinary house on that ordinary street, exactly the small overlooked nothing he had always been. A few days after, the Dursleys wanted rid of him for an afternoon, and Harry was sent to Mrs. Figg's, and she opened the door and looked at him standing on her step, whole and ordinary and alive, and she had to put a hand on the doorframe to keep herself steady. She said nothing in the hall where the cats could carry it. She took him through to the back kitchen, by the cupboard that smelled of cut grass and pepper, and shut the door, and took his right hand in both of hers and turned it over and pushed back the sleeve, and there was the line of goblin silver in the shape of the crossed circle, and she looked at it a long time and then sat down at her kitchen table rather suddenly, as Harry had sat down on the deep road. "Word came," she said, "not up the ladder, down the way I sent mine. 3 nights ago a letter arrived on my mat that no postman brought, no stamp on it and no name, only a mark, that mark, and inside it said in a hand like scratched iron, 'The boy is well, the nation keeps him. You chose rightly, burn this.'" She had not burned it, Harry saw. It was tucked into the frame of the dresser mirror, the one unburned letter in 15 years. "I disobeyed the wisest wizard alive on the word of a 6-year-old and a coin, and I was right and he was wrong, and I do not know that I shall ever get over the size of that. But you are alive, and the little folk are kept, and you have come home with the mark of a nation on your hand that queens have not carried. I minded you your whole life and thought you a poor overlooked scrap, and you were the only one of the whole lot of us who was looking the right way." Her old eyes were bright. "Whatever you grow into, Harry Potter, I will have been the woman who watched you do it. That will do me very well." But under his sleeve there was a line of goblin silver in the shape of a crossed circle with a tail, cool against the warm morning, and against his gum there was a coin that threw an honest shadow, and behind his eyes there were the true things stacked clean where his numbers lived, the milk bottles and the church clock that ran 4 minutes fast, and the whole impossible summer. And out beyond the ordinary walls of the ordinary world, there was a nation under the earth that had bowed to him, and sworn its blood to his, and would not, could not, ever forget. He cracked the eggs into the pan and counted them, too, as he counted everything, and out through the kitchen window the morning came up gold over Privet Drive, and the church clock struck 7, 4 minutes early over a sleeping town that would never know how near it had come, or who had stood in the dark and counted, and Harry Potter, 6 years old and no longer small, kept the secret and kept the faith and began quietly to grow up into the person a whole nation had already decided he was going to be. Chapter 7 end.